Chapter 426, My Nascent Soul's Three Heads 1. He stretched out his hand and beckoned to the coffin, and a series of clanging sounds immediately sounded from inside. That thing was stored in the deepest part of the coffin by Jiang Li. He wanted to quickly take it out, but he knocked over many things in the process. A moment later, a string of golden rice grains slowly floated out of the pitch-black coffin. Name: golden rice. Type: seed. Grade: medium-grade earth rank. Note: grows by a season every day. Every harvest gives 1 bushel. Strengthens the body when eaten as food. This was the treasure Jiang Li had obtained when he climbed the first 1,000 steps in the Star Tower test all those years ago. The golden grain looked like a spiritual plant that grew very quickly and produced a lot. It was only related to the livelihood of ordinary mortals. At most, they could eat rice grown from the golden grain often and strengthen their bodies. However, the effect might not be better than professional medicinal pills. To Jiang Li, it was really not very useful. After the spiritual qi recovery, all plants could grow surprisingly. There were very few places in the continent of the 9 provinces that would experience famine, and there was no need for the golden rice to save them. Therefore, this thing had been thrown into the corner and used as a backup material for the demon awakening technique. It was not valued much. However, by chance, he obtained a magical jade pendant from the Cloud Manor that could probe the merit and sins of things. Once, he happened to put the jade pendant together with this string of rice grain. In the end, the jade pendant suddenly emitted a golden light that was 10 times more dazzling than when it was in his hand. It almost blinded his eyes. Only at that time did Jiang Li realize that he had been ignoring a precious treasure all along. In the primordial world, Earth Emperor Xianxia invented agriculture, farming equipment, and seed preservation. This golden grain was a major milestone for the ancient people to enter the agricultural era. Each season produced crops to feed the people. Countless humans had been saved in ancient times. After eating it, they could also strengthen their bodies and improve their physiques, allowing the innately weak humans to compete with many powerful races in the primordial world and occupy a place to exist. It was an important aspect of the Xianxia clan's prosperity. This golden grain had been passed down through the generations of the Xianxia lineage until it reached the hands of the last human emperor and was finally obtained by Jiang Li. Its function was secondary. The merit condensed on it was the most important thing. King Zhou had placed this item on the first 1,000 steps that was the easiest to obtain, not because it was not important, but because it was too important. He was afraid that the future generations would be unable to obtain it, so he deliberately lowered the difficulty. Moreover, this medium-grade earth rank meant that every rice grain was medium-grade earth rank. Jiang Li caught the golden rice, plucked one of the rice grains and swallowed it. A dense rice fragrance spread out. The 67th crack on Jiang Li's golden core immediately split from head to toe. Then there was the 2nd and 3rd golden grain. With each grain consumed, an additional crack would appear on Jiang Li's golden core. The power of virtuous merit wrapped around Jiang Li's body also became richer and more vigorous. After eating the 33rd grain of golden rice, the purple extreme golden core floating above Jiang Li's head was already covered in 99 uniform cracks. In the end, it exploded with a bang and dispersed into spiritual light that filled the sky. In the spiritual light, one could vaguely see a translucent nascent soul sitting cross-legged. When the dispersed spiritual light gathered again, Jiang Li could see the appearance of his nascent soul clearly. The nascent soul had 3 heads on its neck. One had a benevolent expression, one was a ferocious deity, and one was completely emotionless. All 3 faces had Jiang Li's appearance. Below were 8 arms. The 4 left arms held the pale white ghost lantern Cold Flame, and the 4 right arms held the Suyern clan's human fire. Under the nascent soul sat the black-white dual-colored Karma Lotus platform. On its body was a coiling black scale, 5-clawed true dragon. On its back was a 9 nether wood that unfolded the shade of the tree to block the wind and rain. This nascent soul was greatly different from the ones Jiang Li had seen before. The nascent souls of ordinary cultivators were mostly like jade dolls. If one's cultivation was deeper, their nascent soul would be more transparent and pure. If he used some unorthodox method or cultivated some demonic cultivation method, his nascent soul would show some black spots, purple spots, or abnormal cracks. In some records, Jiang Li had even heard of powerful nascent souls like the nine-colored nascent soul. However, a nascent soul cultivator like Jiang Li, who had 3 heads and 8 arms and carried all kinds of accompanying equipment, was really unheard of. Forget it. In any case, these 3 heads and 8 arms were not deformed. Instead, they looked very harmonious. There was no harm in having them. He looked at his interface. The buff status of high-grade merit blessing had already replaced the medium-grade merit blessing. In order to break through to the nascent soul realm, Jiang Li ate 33 golden rice grains. The power of virtuous merit was not something that could be obtained simply by eating it. However, because of his special golden core and the opportunity to break through, he obtained the merit on this golden rice, causing his merit blessing status to rise again. This was another pleasant surprise. Not only could the power of virtuous merit control the human fire, but it also affected Jiang Li in every aspect at all times. With such a level of merit, he would probably pick up spirit stones casually when he went out in the future. With a wave of his hand, the nascent soul floating above his head immediately floated in front of Jiang Li. Looking at his nascent soul, the 3 heads and 6 eyes of the nascent soul also looked at his body. Looking into his own eyes, this feeling was even more wonderful than looking into the eyes of a parallel mind. Chapter 427, My Nascent Soul's 3 Heads Too. It's just that I feel a little ashamed seeing it naked. Looking at the nascent soul that looked completely like him, Jiang Li suddenly cursed. The 3 heads of the nascent soul also nodded in agreement. Just as he was about to study the changes brought about by breaking through to the nascent soul realm, the round room he was in suddenly began to tremble. On the ground, walls, and even the dome of the room, densely engraved words began to automatically climb and move like the words on the stone door. They all climbed onto Jiang Li's body, but this time, the target of these words was not Jiang Li's body. As these merit runes surged in, countless small words that were even smaller than mites began to appear on his nascent soul. They dyed his nascent soul black from head to toe. What he meant was that a nascent soul being naked was embarrassing, not that he wanted it to have tattoos. Jiang Li cultivated the beast blood diagram and was originally covered in tattoos. Now, it seemed that the newly born and clean nascent soul was about to become even more mafia-like than him. The protective item in the ruin had already been taken away by Jiang Li. These merit runes should have been absorbed by the anti-cultivation spiritual bead and continued to become its energy source. However, the power of virtuous merit attracted each other. These ancient runes that were about to move were attracted by Jiang Li's nascent soul and were intercepted midway. Perhaps the high-grade merit blessing that Jiang Li had just obtained had also played an important role. However, this round room was a huge space that could hold 10 football games at the same time. Although each word was larger than a palm, the total word count easily exceeded 10 million. Dense black dots quickly climbed up Jiang Li's 3-headed nascent soul. The originally crystal-clear appearance was covered by tens of millions of words. At a glance, it was almost pitch black. Unless one's vision was extremely good, they could see that there were extremely fine words on it. It took several hours before these patterns all climbed into Jiang Li's nascent soul. It gave his nascent soul a special ability to become invisible at night. Forget it, although it was a little dark, the benefits were also huge. To others, the nascent soul was definitely a fatal weakness. However, with the protection of these merit runes, Jiang Li's nascent soul might be the place with the highest defense in his entire body in the future. After the last merit rune disappeared, the entire underwater island changed. The surrounding ground began to tremble. Looking up, a huge crack appeared on the circular dome and was still spreading out. It seemed that this place was about to collapse. The battle between the Kai Yu armor and Gyuhe Tianchu had already broken the ground of this underwater island. At that time, with these merit runes, it did not look like anything serious. Now that these carvings were all taken away by Jiang Li, this round room naturally became an ordinary underground stone room. The underwater island was about to collapse because it could no longer support the broken ground. Jiang Li put away his nascent soul. A dark green light flashed on his body, and his entire body had already transformed into a tree root that nimbly burrowed into the stone surface beneath his feet. Previously, he still needed the support of the Nine Nether escape technique from the Nine Nether clone. Now, he could already use it himself. In the face of the Nine Nether escape technique, the hard rocks were as fragile as tofu. He easily pushed through the rock layer and soon appeared on the ground. Sure enough, the entire island was trembling. Cracks were everywhere, and this mystic realm was about to be destroyed. The changes in the bubble also affected the outside world. Actually, long before Jiang Li started to break through, because he had put away the anti-cultivation domain, according to the first law of energy, without being affected by external forces, energy would always transfer from high to low. The underwater island that was so barren that it did not have much spiritual qi was naturally that low place. Without the influence of the anti-cultivation domain, the spiritual qi of the outside world naturally began to move into the bubble. This bubble barrier was sturdy, and even an Earth immortal level attack could not easily break it. However, it could not block the vast natural spiritual qi. Those outside were all experts, so they naturally could observe the flow of these abnormal spiritual qi. At that time, they wanted to report it to Gyuhe Tianchu immediately. It was still Sasha who used the excuse that Lord Dragon Head was currently angry and that whoever appeared in front of him would be unlucky. She temporarily suppressed the information and did not report it. At this moment, Jiang Li put away the merit rune that was the core of the entire mystic realm, causing the underwater island to be on the verge of collapse. From the outside world, the entire bubble began to tremble. Even the surrounding sea area and the dragon transformation island, not far away, experienced an intense earthquake. This commotion could no longer be hidden. Jiang Li contacted Sasha outside. Sure enough, Gyuhe Tianchu, who was healing his injuries, already knew about the abnormality here. Under his orders, the Dragon Transformation Island was organizing the suicide squad to enter the bubble to investigate the situation. Once they discovered anything abnormal, the experts of the Dragon Transformation Island would come out in full strength. As the captain of the Second Fleet, she could not disobey the Dragon Head's orders. She could only stall for time when executing it. Jiang Li frowned and did not leave immediately. Instead, he flew into the air and glanced at the collapsed island. Soon, he discovered a crooked mountain in the center of the island. On it, he saw a shallow pool of water and a familiar woman. The girl, Gyuhe Jianmo, was actually not dead. One had to know that a battle between Earth immortals had happened in this damned place before. Ordinary nascent soul cultivators did not dare to say if they were qualified to watch the battle, but a mortal like her could actually live until now. There was luck involved, but this lady's determination was indeed admirable. After knowing each other for a few days, Gyuhe Jianmo had helped him greatly. Jiang Li could not leave him here to die. His figure flickered, and when he appeared again, he was already beside Gyuhe Jianmo. This girl was unconscious. She was hanging on a stone spike on the inclined mountain peak. Her entire body was floating in the air, and her face was pale as paper. Looking at the surrounding environment, Jiang Li quickly analyzed the situation. Gyuhe Jianmo should have already climbed to the peak at that time, but in the aftermath of the battle between the two experts, she almost fell down 1,000-feet cliff from the impact. At the last moment, she grabbed a stone spike that grew out of the mountain peak and did not fall to death. However, under such circumstances, she could not crawl back to a safe place. In fact, she could not even last long if she grabbed the stone spike. Therefore, this lady directly placed her palm on the stone spike. His palm was completely pierced by a sharp stone spike, and she hung on it. This wound took all her weight. When the entire mountain peak was tilted, it actually saved her life. However, it also caused her to faint from the pain. He did not expect a seemingly weak woman to be so bold. Jiang Li rescued the person from the stone spike and temporarily straightened this mountain before placing it beside the dragon transformation pool. As pure wood attribute spiritual qi swept across, the egg-sized hole in Jiang Mo's palm was quickly filled with new flesh and blood. On this island, many things were not a problem for Jiang Li at all. In the eyes of mortals, it might be a life and death tribulation. After a few days of taking the risk alone and climbing up 1,000 feet high alone, and then being hung on the stone spike like dried meat for a day and night, this caused Gyuhe Jiang Mo's body to reach its limit, and only then was she unable to wake up. Now that she was nourished by the spiritual qi, the exhaustion and pain in her body were swept away. Jiang Mo's eyelashes trembled, and she finally woke up slowly. Sir Li Jiang, is that you?" When she woke up from her coma, Jiang Mo saw the man in her dream at first glance. However, for some reason, her eyes moistened when she saw Jiang Li. "I'm indeed dead." "I'm sorry, Sir Li Jiang. Jiang Mo was useless and caused you to lose your life." "Sir, I can't repay your kindness. Jiang Mo has become a ghost and is willing to serve you as a servant." So she thought he was dead. Previously, Gyuhe Zhuohu had told her that as long as she became the young lady who transformed into a dragon, she could send her subordinates to save Jiang Li. It was precisely this goal that supported her until now. Unfortunately, it did not succeed in the end. She was sad because of this. Chapter 428, Ancient Leech Dragon Transformation 1. In the sea area near the Dragon Transformation Island, in the center of the coral forest, the originally calm, huge bubble was constantly fluctuating violently. From time to time, a few holes would appear, splitting into a few small bubbles that floated to the surface. A group of talisman formation masters from the Dragon Transformation Island were surrounding the bubble in fear and checking the situation of this natural barrier. They quickly set up a temporary array formation in an attempt to maintain the stability of the barrier. However, looking at how these masters were sweating, they knew that the situation was not ideal. "Lord Dragon Head, according to our calculations, this barrier is very likely to last for another half an hour." It was an old man who had 2 glowing lanterns on his head, who swam shakily to Gyuhe Tianchu's side. He reported the situation of the barrier in fear. Gyuhe Tianchu, who was wrapped in rune bandages and had temporarily suppressed his injuries, glanced coldly at the old man, scaring him until his face was pale. The 2 lanterns flickered as if he was about to die at any moment. Fortunately, the moody dragon head did not slap the subordinate in front of it to death this time. He casually waved his hand to dismiss him. The old lantern man felt as if he had been granted amnesty and ran back to continue working hard. After letting go of the array formation elder, Gyuhe Tianchu turned to look at Xianxia. Xianxia, who already had a guilty conscience, felt a chill in her heart, but she did not show it. After bowing respectfully to the dragon head, she turned around and approached the bubble. She used the token to send out a spiritual light and opened an entrance in the barrier. Then she plunged in with a dark expression. Then 454 Dragon Transformation Island cultivators followed behind her and swam in with despair on their faces. Although Gyuhe Tianchu had not returned for long, how could they hide what had happened on the island from him? Not to mention that everyone on the Dragon Transformation Island knew that Xianxia and the dead eldest young master Gyuhe Macheng had formed a party for personal gains. Now that the eldest young master had been casually slapped to death by Lord Dragon Head, how could she, the captain of the Second Fleet, be any better? However, Gyuhe Tianchu did not kill her immediately. In any case, his son and the thief inside were already dead. The plot, had already been defeated by his absolute strength. Guhe Tianchu was also confident that no one could do anything under his watch. It just so happened that he needed people now, so he planned to extract this woman's final value. He temporarily did not want to enter the bubble to face the monster formed from armor. However, in the mystic realm, there were important things that he had to bring out safely. Therefore, because Xianxia, the captain of the Second Fleet, was implicated by Guhe Macheng, she was very honored to be given a heavy responsibility. She would personally lead the team to investigate the situation in the secret ground and bring out the things under the dragon transformation pool before this mystic realm collapsed. Or rather, these people were all from the Suicide Squad. Apart from Xianxia, the strongest among the 400-plus members of the Suicide Squad was only at the Golden Core realm. Under the orders of the Dragon Head, Guhe Tianchu, the group of marginal pirates who were least welcomed on the Dragon Transformation Island, had a chance to display their value. Their mission was very simple. They would go in to die and send everything they saw back to the outside of the bubble. After Xianxia and the others entered, Guhe Tianchu took out a disc and formed a few seals. Some sounds immediately sounded from the disc, and some blurry images appeared. These 455 people all had a monitoring spirit stone on them. This special stone did not need the carrier to actively stimulate it. It could receive the surrounding sounds and scenes at all times, and then transmit them back to the disc artifact. Through the scene in the disc, one could vaguely see that the mountains in the bubble had collapsed and the ground had cracked. It was already the scene of doomsday. Seeing this scene, Guhe Tianchu frowned deeply. The things in this mystic realm were extraordinary to him. He did not want to lose them so easily. Lord Xianxia, inside, the island inside is collapsing. This ruin is about to collapse. Captain Xianxia, save us. Panic voices sounded. The strength of these members of the Suicide Squad was weak. If the mystic realm was destroyed, they who were staying inside would not have much chance of surviving. There was only half an hour left until the mystic realm was destroyed. The countdown for life had already begun. No one could remain calm. However, Captain Xianxia could not even protect herself now, so how could she care about them? If they retreated now, they would probably be slapped to death by Lord Dragon Head as soon as they appeared. Spread out and search separately. If you find any traces of the enemy, immediately report back. If you can kill the enemy, Lord Dragon Head promises to let you rise 3 ranks in a row. We will also provide medicinal pills to assist you in advancing to the nascent soul realm. Advancing 3 ranks and advancing to the nascent soul realm was something that these cultivators dreamed of. However, they could not be happy at all. This so-called reward was like a joke. They were not blind and had all seen Guhe Tianchu's injuries. Even the extremely powerful Dragon Head was heavily injured when it fought that enemy. Now he wanted them to kill that enemy. This reward was simply insincere. Xianxia ignored these guys. After saying this with a cold expression, she flew towards the center of the island. Chapter 429, Ancient Leech Dragon Transformation, 2. She was a loyal pirate, so she naturally had to obey the orders of the Lord. Guhe Tianchu stared intently at Xianxia's movements through the disc. After discovering that she could fly inside and was not too affected, he knew that the anti-cultivation domain inside had already disappeared. The confidence that he had lost after being beaten up by the monster was mostly recovered. Guhe Tianchu felt that the main reason why he had been beaten to such a sorry state earlier was because of the influence of the anti-cultivation domain. Now that the domain inside had collapsed, if he fought again, he was confident that he could definitely defeat that monster, of course. If he could heal his injuries first, that would be even better. However, he could not be sure if that monster would become stronger after leaving the anti-cultivation domain. Therefore he, who was already heavily injured, did not want to take the risk personally. He had to send out some touchstones to test it out. Moreover, the Origin Blood Ancient Leech Queen that he had placed under the Dragon Transformation Pool could not be lost due to the inheritance of the Dragon Transformation Island. He had to bring it out before the mystic realm collapsed. Xianxia was very fast. In a few breaths, she landed on the centermost mountain peak. This mountain peak had tilted earlier and was straightened by brute force. The foundation of the mountain had already been completely destroyed. Before long, it would be destroyed along with the entire mystic realm. The top of this mountain was flat and the area was not large. A small pool of water could approach at a glance. This is Miss Jiang Li." She landed beside the pool and saw a pale young girl lying in the dragon transformation pool. "Lord Dragon Head, she's still alive." Xianxia stepped forward and checked her nose, looking surprised. After successfully entering the dragon transformation pool, theoretically speaking, Jiang Li was already the young master of the Dragon Transformation Island. "Ignore her, break the bottom of the pool and bring out what's inside." From the monitoring spirit stone, Xianxia's heartless words sounded. This Lord Dragon Head had just personally killed his son. He did not care about the life and death of a mortal child. However, as soon as he finished speaking, the bottom of the dragon transformation pool in front of Xianxia automatically cracked and rose. Something huge was about to break out from the bottom. Sensing danger, Captain Xianxia reacted quickly. She grabbed the ancient black giant Mo in the pool and quickly retreated. After retreating more than 10,000 feet, the mountaintop that had just stood exploded. A bloated figure flew out and roared loudly. Accompanied by the dragon roar, a terrifying aura spread out. "How is this possible? This is the dragon blood suppression." Xianxia cried out in surprise. It was as if she could not even fly anymore, and her body fell towards the ground. The other 400+ members of the suicide squad even felt that aura. They immediately rolled their eyes and fainted on the ground. The thing that appeared from under the dragon transformation pool was completely black in color. There was a faint red light of spiritual chi blood in its body. The main body was bloated like a bag, and the neck was long and flexible. The head was a circular mouthpiece that looked like a suction cup. There were also 10 eyes distributed irregularly around the mouthpiece. It looked like a leech that had been enlarged by more than 10,000 times. This was the Origin Blood Ancient Leech Queen, but on the head of this queen, a pair of dragon horns grew. Its body continuously became slender and agile, and 4 translucent bumps could be seen with the naked eye under its abdomen. Through the skin of the bumps, 4 dragon claws were being nurtured. This Origin Blood Ancient Leech was evolving towards the dragon form. Damn it, it absorbed the spiritual chi. That beast has transformed into a dragon. Outside, Xianxia's expression changed again and again. The situation was turning worse and worse. In terms of the anti-cultivation domain in the Xianxia tomb, it was actually very useful. Apart from being a warning and test for those who came later, the high-intensity domain in the merit room was used to restrict the Kaiyu armor. Outside the stone door, they had to drive away all the spiritual chi in the underwater island, mainly to restrict the Origin Blood Ancient Leeches here. A magical creature like the Origin Blood Ancient Leech was not a spiritual beast that needed spiritual chi to survive, but it could absorb any bloodline and purify it. It was an extremely useful tool. However, it was inevitable that during the process of using them, a large amount of dragon blood would definitely accumulate in the body of the Origin Blood Ancient Leech Queen. With such a quantity of dragon blood, even if it was not a spiritual beast, it was still transformed now. Moreover, after reaching the bloodline level of a pure-blooded dragon, even if it did not cultivate, its strength would increase every day when it slept. Therefore, it was not easy to raise them as livestock. However, this underwater island did not have much spiritual chi at all, so it became the most perfect place to raise the Origin Blood Ancient Leech. There was no spiritual chi to absorb. Although dragon blood could make the Origin Blood Ancient Leech stronger than ordinary wild beasts, it was still no different from an ant in front of cultivators. After raising it for so many years, there were no problems. As long as he harvested it regularly, he could create the best dragon transformation pill. This origin blood ancient leech had received too much nourishment from Xianxia in the past few hundred years. In order to further increase the purity of the dragon blood, this current dragon had even thought of a way to reproduce children on a large scale and use the outstanding bloodline of his children to supply the origin blood ancient leech to absorb and purify. Chapter 430, Ancient Leech Dragon Transformation, 3. It had to be said that crazy methods were really very effective. The dragon blood transplanted in his body had been purified by the origin blood ancient leech and had reached the level of a pure-blooded dragon. It was almost on par with Jiang Li if he did not have the dragon pearl. Although his descendants were much inferior to him, they were still much better than the mixed dragon blood creatures in the sea. After many years of accumulation, in terms of the purity and total amount of dragon blood, this origin blood ancient leech had even surpassed him. As long as he accumulated for a few years, the dragon blood extracted would be enough to allow him to advance further. However, the current situation was terrible. After this origin blood ancient leech came into contact with spiritual qi, it immediately wanted to transform into a dragon. Roar! The origin blood ancient leech undergoing dragon transformation suddenly waved its newly grown dragon tail, flew to Sasha's side, and bit her waist. Affected by the dragon blood suppression, Sasha was unable to resist at all and was directly bitten on the waist. Along with it was a token hanging on her waist. Xianxia was dumbfounded. Since when did this beast gain intelligence behind his back? It actually knew how to snatch the token. Could it be that this beast knew how to use the barrier token? This absurd thought quickly became reality. The token that was bitten by the origin blood ancient leech immediately emitted a spiritual light. Then the origin blood ancient leech directly passed through the bubble barrier covering the island and entered the seawater outside. Then it flicked its tail and actually used the water escape skillfully with the dragon race's talent. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared. Xianxia could not be bothered to stay wary anymore. The monster that was probably still in the bubble also used water escape to pursue the fleeing origin blood ancient leech. The water escape technique of an earth immortal expert was naturally much more powerful than the origin blood ancient leech that was transforming into a dragon, or rather, was much more powerful than Jiang Li. His main body was currently hidden in the stomach of this origin blood ancient leech. After all, without his help, how could the bit of spiritual qi that seeped into the underwater island really allow the origin blood ancient leech to transform into a dragon? He was the one who had just released the pressure of the dragon race and used water escape to escape. He could have released the ancient leech to attract attention and then fled in the other direction. However, this core precious insect of the Xianxia clan's dragon ruler lineage was left behind by the ancestors of the human race, so it naturally should return to the hands of him, the legitimate successor of the human emperor. Moreover, this huge worm had already eaten the 9 nether earth fruit and became Jiang Li's good friend. How could Jiang Li abandon it? After arranging for Sasha to save Jian Mo, he planned to personally bring this huge worm away. Beast, how dare you escape? Jiang Li had transformed into a black dragon in the body of the origin blood ancient leech and was executing the water escape with all his might. His speed was already extremely fast. He only paused for a moment when he entered the land of storms. In that instant, a faster escape light chased after him. A poisonous dragon claw grabbed from behind. It was as if space was distorted under the dragon claw, making it impossible to dodge. However, facing the methods of an earth immortal, Jiang Li, who was hiding in the stomach of the worm, did not panic. In his sea of consciousness, the second and fifth parallel minds that looked like 2 reversed 9 netherwood joined forces with the main body to release a mysterious force. 9 nether divine art, inverted domain. Chapter 431, Disaster of the Dragon Island 1. the dragon claw tainted with poison crushed down with invincible might. Even Jiang Li, who had already broken through to the nascent soul realm, felt that he was far inferior to that power. After all, the difference between an earth immortal and a soul formation cultivator was too great. Even if Jiang Li's nascent soul was extraordinary and had the talent of a true immortal, it was not so easy to cross that huge gap. At most, he was only halfway through. His current strength had already left the scope of the soul formation realm, but he had not reached the earth immortal realm. At this moment, a circle of formless power spread out and enveloped the huge dragon claw. The rules of direction were overwritten and modified, and the forward force suddenly turned back. The poisonous dragon claw immediately stopped above the head of the origin blood ancient leech, as if it was blocked by some force. The power of the inverted domain successfully intercepted Guhe Tianchu's dragon claw, but the scene that he imagined sent the other party flying did not happen. Because the range of Jiang Li's domain was limited, he was unable to completely envelop his opponent. The only thing that had its direction reversed was the dragon claw. Just like that, Guhe Tianchu continuously increased his strength, using brute force to unleash his own resistance. Then, Jiang Li discovered some flaws in his inverted domain. He had only come into contact with this divine art for a short period of time. After all, he had not cultivated it to the point of perfection, so the domain he could imitate was naturally far inferior to the true Back Yin mountain. It was obvious if he fought cultivators of the same level. However, if the difference in cultivation was too great, he would be unable to reverse the other party's full strength. Moreover, as the might of the other party's claw increased, the motionless claw actually pressed down towards him bit by bit again. Jiang Li also felt a strand of extremely powerful pressure. Was this the pressure that the 9 nether wood in the graveyard endured when facing an earth immortal? Come back obediently and be my worm. Boom! In the chaotic current, a ball of air suddenly exploded. The origin blood ancient leech that looked more and more like a dragon was suddenly sent flying. After shattering a rock below, it used the water escape technique again and fled into the distance. The claw did not touch it in the end. However, as the caster of the inverted domain, Jiang Li himself existed as the pivot of the domain. Just like how if the repulsion spell could not send the enemy flying, it might instead send itself flying. Jiang Li borrowed this force to actively eject himself. Back then, the 9 nether wood in the graveyard could rely on the inverted domain to resist the attack of the Mu family's master at the price of injuries and large expenditure. Now, Jiang Li had 2 parallel minds to assist in casting the spell. The strength of the inverted domain was only stronger than the 9 nether wood in the graveyard. Coupled with his current strength that far exceeded the 9 nether wood in the graveyard back then, it was naturally easier for him to do such a thing. He could even protect the origin blood ancient leech and ensure that it was not injured at all. What a slippery worm! Guhe Tianchu was surprised that this insect could actually become so powerful in a short period of time. However, this further proved the power of the dragon blood that had accumulated over the years. No matter what, he had to capture this thing back. At that time, he would suck dry the dragon blood in the body of the origin blood ancient leech, and everything would return to him. Similarly, he executed the water escape technique and chased after Jiang Li. In the blink of an eye, he had already left the land of storms. Guhe Tianchu's escape technique was stronger and his speed was faster. He could always catch up to Jiang Li. However, his attacks were blocked by that strange domain power. His attacks were useless after several attempts. The dignified dragon transformation island's dragon head was a famous figure even in the cultivation world of the entire eastern region. He did not expect that he would actually be unable to capture a young man who had just broken through to the nascent soul realm. If he knew that not only was Jiang Li not dead, but had also taken away the inheritance that he had yearned for hundreds of years, and snatched the origin blood ancient leech that he had nurtured for 1,000 years, he would probably lose his mind. After using the inverted domain to block Yuhe Tianchu's attack again, Jiang Li gradually found his confidence. The originally insurmountable and powerful Earth Immortal no longer seemed so unreachable in his eyes. Hiding in the body of the Origin Blood Ancient Leech, a look of eagerness appeared on his face. After making a hand seal and activating some hidden preparations, he fled in a specific direction with a goal. After they left, the ground control flag that had been inserted into the core array formation of the Dragon Transformation Island a long time ago moved automatically without wind. All land in the world belonged to the Emperor, and all humans were subjects of the Imperial dynasty. Under the control of the ground control flag, the dignified sect of the Dragon Transformation Island directly changed owners. It temporarily became the territory distributed to Jiang Li by the last human emperor. In theory, everything in the territory had to listen to Jiang Li's orders. Then, the core array formation of the Dragon Transformation Island suddenly began to circulate in the opposite direction. The large-scale barrier that divided the surrounding sea area suddenly disappeared without any warning. Under the dual influence of the reverse operation of the array formation and the ground control flag, even the wall of storms that had always been a natural barrier around the Dragon Transformation Island was temporarily suppressed and stopped. At this moment, all the array masters on the Dragon Transformation Island were in the coral forest, maintaining the stability of the bubble. Although the other cultivators discovered the abnormality of the array formation, they did not know the reason or how to deal with it. Then, before they could react, the situation took a turn for the worse. The impregnable Dragon Transformation Island was about to suffer a calamity. Chapter 432, Disaster of the Dragon Island 2. Hey, don't you think? The bottom of the sea is a little different today. On a pirate ship that was swimming underwater, a Dragon Transformation Island cultivator who was carrying out a patrolling mission stood on the deck and asked his companion not far away. It was clearly a mission that he carried out every day, but at this moment, this beautiful seabed became especially oppressive, making even an old fox like him involuntarily tremble. A shadow enveloped them. Above their heads, 3 huge monsters appeared from nowhere and looked at them with 3 pairs of dangerous fish eyes. Compared to these sea beasts, the patrolling pirate ship was simply a toy in the hands of children. The dragon beast in the coral forest has run out. Quickly ask for help. His other companion trembled as he took out a communication spirit stone. However, halfway through his request for help, a fin that was larger than a ship slapped down, instantly shattering the entire pirate ship. For a time, the communication spirit stones of the various higher-ups of the Dragon Transformation Island rang non-stop. Such attacks by dragon beasts were happening everywhere in the entire land of storms. It was even to the extent that the scene of a group of dragon beasts attacking the Dragon Transformation Island made this group of pirates experience the feeling of being plundered. Just by closing the barrier, it was naturally not so easy for monsters to riot and the dragon beasts to attack the city. However, before Jiang Li left, he had even used the aura of the dragon race and the talent of the merman race to drive the sea beasts here to go crazy. That situation was different. In the sea area around the Dragon Transformation Island, there were many dragon blood sea beasts in the coral forest. That was because the Dragon Transformation Pool in the center of the underwater island was really a Dragon Transformation Pool. Before the cultivationless age, regardless of whether it was a nut or a horse, as long as it was thrown into the Dragon Transformation Pool and soaked in it, it could become a dragon when it came out. However, with the arrival of the cultivationless age, Yellow Emperor Xianxia was worried that the dragon race would not exist in the future, and the dragon blood would wither. His dragon ruler lineage would become nothing. He took the initiative to cut through the Dragon Transformation Pool and let the dragon bloodline inside flow into the surrounding sea, transforming a large number of creatures in the sea into dragon blood creatures. they could use their reproduction to pass down the dragon blood. He was very successful. The sea beasts in the coral forest sea had successfully transmitted the dragon blood to this day, becoming the foundation of the Dragon Transformation Island. Unfortunately, the Dragon Transformation Island had encountered Jiang Li. Under the fusion of the talent of the dragon race and the merman, his control over these sea beasts surpassed that of the dragon head, Xianxia. The violent dragon blood creatures were enough to make the Dragon Transformation Island suffer. Now that Xianxia had left, did the pirates of the Dragon Transformation Island have any sense of teamwork? Some immediately fled, while others fought alone. For a time, dealing with a group of sea beasts had actually fallen into chaos. However, this was not the end. As they fought with the sea beasts, everyone felt a regular sea tremor. The source of the tremor was not the collapsing underwater island. Instead, it came from the other 9 directions around the Dragon Transformation Island. Under the influence of this tremor, the waves rose in front of their eyes. They watched helplessly as these waves evolved into a monstrous tsunami. It was the first time they had seen a tsunami more than 3,000 feet tall around the island at a 360-degree angle. This was clearly not a natural tsunami. In this sea, the race that was best at stirring up waves was the sea giant. The other soul formation cultivators of the Dragon Transformation Island attacked and defeated this tsunami that looked like it could destroy the world. However, the huge figure that appeared after the tsunami made them feel serious. The 9 tribes of the sea giant each mobilized more than 10 giants that were as tall as mountains and appeared here at the same time. They looked at the huge skull that had been turned into a palace on the highest mountain of the Dragon Transformation Island. Hatred erupted in the eyes of the 100 giants. They wanted to take revenge on this group of pirates. At the same time, they promised that whoever among the 9 brothers could bring back their father's head would become the next sea giant king and reunite the 9 tribes. The sea giants waved their thick sea rock pillars and roared as they rushed up, fighting with the higher-ups of the Dragon Transformation Island. These guys looked like they were all brawn and no brains. In fact, these sea giants were cunning. Just relying on hatred and revenge was impossible to convince them to attack. The merman Namur almost got a sore throat from talking to them, but they did not even agree to cooperate. It was not until Jiang Li promised these sea giants that he would deal with the endless wall of storms for them, close down most of the defensive array formations in the Dragon Transformation Island, and even draw away Xianxia for them, so that they did not have to face Earth immortal experts. Only then were they willing to attack. Moreover, the goal of these 9 tribes was to retrieve their father's skull and become the new king, not just to take revenge. Compared to these guys, the wind protection giant that slept in the mountain range every day was much cuter. First, there was the dragon beast riot, then the sea giant's sneak attack. The Dragon Transformation Island cultivators without a leader fell into a bitter battle. As for the talisman formation cultivators who were originally staying in the coral forest, it was even more difficult. They were not good at fighting to begin with. At this moment, they were directly in the center of the dragon beast nest, and a large number of casualties appeared immediately. The group of old men retreated step by step. They were forced into a corner and wanted to hide in the mystic realm that was about to collapse. "Quickly open the barrier and let me out." At this moment, Sasha's anxious voice suddenly sounded from the black disk that Xianxia had originally used to monitor. This mystic realm was about to be destroyed, and her token had been snatched away by the Origin Blood ancient leech. If she could not leave before that, she might be fine, but the young Lady Jian Mo in her hand would really die. The old man with 2 lanterns on his head heard Sasha's voice and hurriedly grabbed the black disk. He was a little hesitant, afraid that releasing Sasha privately would arouse the displeasure of Lord Dragonhead. However, soon, he used the token to activate the bubble's spiritual light. After all, these old, weak, and crippled people could not last long under the siege of those violent dragon beasts. Now that the dragon beast was not here, only the powerful captain of the Second Fleet, Xianxia, could save them. Just before the underwater island collapsed, Xianxia brought Jiang Li out of the mystic realm. Then the bubble barrier suddenly collapsed inward, scattering into countless small bubbles that floated to the surface of the sea. The entire ruin was destroyed today. She reached out and grabbed a bubble after the mystic realm collapsed, putting Jiang Li inside. Although this lady had an extraordinary dragon bloodline in her body, she had not undergone cultivation development after all. At most, she could hold her breath for a few minutes longer than others. She could not breathe underwater. Protect her. She's the new young lady of our dragon transformation island. Leave those sea beasts to me. After handing the person to the talisman formation cultivators to protect, Xianxia's entire body twisted, turning into hundreds of seven-gills dragon eels that rushed towards the arrogant dragon beasts in the surroundings. To be able to slaughter and devour dragon blood beasts here without any fear was a rare opportunity. When the talisman array masters heard that the woman in the bubble was the new young lady, they paid attention to her. Talismans made of special seagrass were stuck to the bubble, protecting the girl in the center. In the bubble, Jiang Li, who was about to obtain power and status, had long woken up. She curled up her body and hugged a fruit tightly in her arms. 2 streaks of tears slid down her tightly shut eyes. It was a 9-nether earth fruit that Jiang Li had left her before he left. As long as she fed this fruit to her mother, she would be able to replenish her lifespan and revive. At that time, not only would her mother come back to life, they would also escape their lonely life and enjoy the envy and admiration of countless people. She would also become a powerful cultivator. If she returned to her previous country, her king father would kowtow to her in a flattering manner. This should have been a happy thing, but the important Sir Li Jiang had left. Sir, I'll definitely find you. Then I'll repay you with the rest of my life. Chapter 433, Man of Treasures Jiang Li. On the other side, Xianxia, who had already chased 500 kilometers in the sea, naturally received the emergency information from the Dragon Transformation Island immediately. However, he did not care about that at all. Even the speed of the water escape did not slow down at all. In the eyes of this dragon head, even if the entire Dragon Transformation Island was combined, it would still be inferior to the origin blood ancient leech in front of him. He was an earth immortal who controlled his own strength. Even if all the cultivators of the Dragon Transformation Island were destroyed today, as long as he was around, the Dragon Transformation Island could rise again at any time. It was even to the extent that, after absorbing the dragon blood in the body of the origin blood ancient leech, he might be able to climb to an even higher realm and stand on equal footing with those high-grade divine judgment forces. Therefore, Xianxia ignored the alarm from the sect at all. After crushing the communication spirit stone, he still chased after Jiang Li relentlessly. On Jiang Li's side, he naturally knew the current situation of the Dragon Transformation Island. However, looking at the pursuing light behind him, he knew that his plan had failed. Jiang Li was not discouraged. After all, it was absolutely understandable for a man who had killed thousands of descendants to be so vicious and hard-hearted. It was not likely that he would give up on benefits to save people. Fortunately, through the deal with the sea giant race, they had already prepared a suitable battlefield for themselves. Jiang Li wanted to have another battle with this Dragon Transformation Island's dragon head there. At the very least, he could rely on the prearranged methods to escape. Jiang Li's main body strength was far inferior to an earth immortal. However, in the cultivation world, the decisive factor that affected the outcome of fights was not only cultivation, but also cultivation, foundation, and divine arts. Artifacts were also of utmost importance. With a full body of top-notch equipment, Jiang Li might not be afraid of this guy. He had just broken through to the nascent soul realm. It was time to fight this guy seriously. Soon, at the designated location in the sea ahead, a circular mountain appeared. The mountain was very similar to a tortoise shell. There were several huge caves on the side. From afar, it looked like a tortoise with its shell shrunk. As if it was being chased, the origin blood ancient leech plunged into one of the caves and disappeared in the darkness. Yue Tianchu, who followed closely behind, stopped in front of the cave. With his vision, he naturally discovered that this mountain in the sea was not ordinary. After flying around the entire mountain, he discovered that this thing was very likely a tortoise shell. What kind of tortoise would be able to have such a huge tortoise shell? This sea was not far from the Dragon Transformation Island, so he was quite familiar with it. This had never happened before. Moreover, through observing the situation at the bottom of the sea nearby, he could confirm that this tortoise shell mountain had probably just appeared not long ago. Most importantly, the pure-blooded dragon blood in his body instinctively yearned for this mountain, as if something was calling him. This tortoise shell mountain must be related to the dragon race. Perhaps it was another mystic realm related to the dragon race. Yue Tianchu suddenly thought of something. Could it be that the mystic realm of the Dragon Transformation Island's underwater island was not alone but connected? After cracking one of the mystic realms, the second mystic realm would automatically open. That thief of unknown origins had done something in the underwater island that caused the mystic realm to collapse, and this tortoise mountain ruin appeared at the same time. Could it be that this origin blood ancient leech had also been summoned by this mystic realm to rush here? Feeling the throbbing of the dragon blood in his body, Yue Tianchu continuously imagined this. The more he thought about it, the more it made sense. Otherwise, how could there be such a coincidence? However, as a precaution, he still had to seal this tortoise mountain mystic realm first. He took out a few black vine pots and threw them at the caves of the tortoise mountain. A special seal was formed, and then dense black vine pots piled up and quickly grew, quickly blocking the other holes. Yue Tianchu swam into the last hole, and the hole behind him was immediately sealed. He wanted to catch a turtle in a jar in this tortoise mountain. As soon as he entered, Yue Tianchu immediately became excited. Dragon Aura. After entering the cave, he discovered that there was indeed a huge space inside. Moreover, the aura of the dragon race was everywhere, ancient and great. Swinging its tail, it blew away the layer of soil below, revealing a large number of dragon bones. Even on the Dragon Transformation Island, he had never seen so many dragon bones. This was a dragon tomb, a true dragon tomb. It turned out that the origin blood ancient leech had not come here to escape, but to guide him. It guided him to this new dragon race ruin. As expected, the heavens were with him. Treasures, fortune, artifacts, inheritances. It was as if these things were all waiting for him ahead. After swimming for a distance, the seawater in front of him became deeper and deeper. Soon, he returned to his human form from a poisonous dragon and stepped on the dry ground. The interior of the tortoise-shell dragon tomb was pitch black, but it could not block his vision. He followed the call and walked towards the center of the space. However, he did not discover the shadow of the origin blood ancient leech. Instead, there was a familiar aura waiting for him. No wonder I couldn't find you on the underwater island, so you came here. Unfortunately, you won't be my match here. Be obedient and become part of my strength. This is your destiny. What appeared in front of Yue Tianchu was a figure in black scale armor. Previously, when the Kaiyu armor went berserk, it had absorbed Jiang Li's spiritual qi. It was very different now that he did not release the aura of Kaiyu's muscles. However, it was still recognized by Yue Tianchu. In his eyes, this monster-like guardian of the ruin had appeared here. This further confirmed the fact that this tortoise-shell dragon tomb was the Dragon Transformation Island's chain ruin. What made his eyes light up even more was that there were 4 items in front of the pitch-black armor. A black shield with a closed eye socket. It was a bloodthirsty and abnormally violent blood trident. A pitch-black, thin and long hollow spear. There was also a huge halberd stabbed into the stone monument that looked down on the world. Caillou armor, bloodthirsty trident, mosquito spear, human emperor's battle halberd. None of these 4 items were lower than the earth rank. Coupled with the black scale armor that Jiang Li was wearing, there were 5 of them. Such a number of earth rank artifacts had never appeared even in the top auction houses of the cultivation world of the eastern region. Even he, the Dragon Transformation Island's dragon head, only had an earth rank artifact. As long as he obtained them, who could stop his rise? If he knew that Jiang Li still had a coffin, a lotus platform, and a flag that was all precious treasures at the earth rank or above, how would he feel? In front of Guhe Tianchu, 2 more arms grew out from Jiang Li's back. One of his left hand grabbed the anti-cultivation spiritual bead shield of the Caillou armor, and the other grabbed the mosquito spear. One right hand grabbed the bloodthirsty trident, and the last right hand grabbed the human emperor's battle halberd that was embedded in the stone monument. A dense stream of human merit flowed along Jiang Li's right hand and wrapped around the heavy halberd. The halberd that he was originally unable to move at all, no matter how hard he tried, finally slowly withdrew from the stone monument. Previously, he had been unable to pull out this halberd, but now he could. Chapter 434, Forced to Cheat 1. As the human emperor's battle halberd was slowly pulled out of the stone monument, an aura that looked down on the world spread out. Not far away, Guhe Tianchu's pupils constricted. That aura made his heart slow down by half a beat, and he felt fear when facing an emperor. His body instinctively wanted to lower his head. This situation made Guhe Tianchu feel that it was inexplicable. He had lived on the Dragon Transformation Island since he was born and had interacted with cultivators since he was young. If he met a king of a mortal country, the other party would always lower his head. When had he ever felt this way? His hands were even not daring to wave his claws at the halberd. This made his aura subconsciously lower. Holding the human emperor's battle halberd, Jiang Li was extremely shocked in his mind. Even if he merely raised this halberd, it had already swallowed half of the spiritual qi in his body, and the expenditure was something he had never seen before. However, when he sensed the power that was reflected onto him, Jiang Li was even more shocked. Among all the treasures on the human emperor's battle halberd, only the Caillou armor and the anti-cultivation spiritual bead could compare to it. The other earth-rank treasures might not be comparable even if they were combined. It was the weapon of the last human emperor. In the final battle of the divine investiture tribulation, the Shang dynasty's king, Dai Xin, held the human emperor's battle halberd and suppressed more than 10 famous third-generation disciples of the Chan school until they could not raise their heads. Even if such a divine weapon only left behind a little power, it was enough to make people tremble in fear. Boom! Energy erupted from beneath his feet, and Jiang Li's figure instantly vanished on the spot. When he appeared again, he had already arrived before Guhe Tianchu. The spear of the broken-winged black mosquito in his left and right hands stabbed out together with the earth-rank demonic weapon, the bloodthirsty trident. The 2 powerful weapons tore through the air and stabbed at the enemy's head and heart. Good treasure, good timing. The power of an earth-rank weapon did not scare a dignified earth immortal. The powerful dragon head Guhe did not dodge. Instead, he smiled sinisterly and stretched out 2 dragon claws covered in scales to face it. He easily dodged the sharp edge of the tip and grabbed the 2 weapons with his dragon claws. Sparks flew where it touched, and it was forcefully stopped by the 2 dragon claws. Then an even greater force came. Jiang Li could not stand firmly and was dragged forward. Guhe Tianhu exerted strength with his claws, actually wanting to directly snatch the 2 items from Jiang Li's hands. However, how could these 2 artifacts be so easy to capture? Countless spikes suddenly grew out of the bloodthirsty trident's long pole. After piercing through the dragon claw's skin, it crazily absorbed the dragon blood. On the other side, the mosquito spear was even more dangerous. The dragon claw that grabbed the spear tip visibly shriveled. Not only did it return to the appearance of a human hand, it also became skin and bones covered in wrinkles, as if it was an old man on the verge of death. What a fierce weapon! Surprised by the power of the two ferocious weapons, Gyuhe Tianchu still did not have the intention to let go. Instead, he struck out with two forces that passed through the bloodthirsty trident and the broken mosquito spear, intending to shake Jiang Li's palm away. Every move was filled with the confidence of an earth immortal. However, in the next moment, his expression changed, and he immediately gave up on letting go. His figure disappeared. The human emperor's battle halberd smashed into the spot where Gyuhe Tianchu had been standing with boundless might. Pinnacle martial emperor. In the distorted space, black lightning snakes darted around. The entire tortoise shell and dragon tomb shook from the impact. This smash threw out another half of the spiritual qi that he had just recovered. Jiang Li took a deep breath and raised his head to look up. As expected of an earth immortal, he did not even see how the other party had dodged earlier. However, this was the human emperor's battle halberd. Even if Jiang Li was still unable to unleash its strength, even the most ordinary swing could not be dodged easily. Standing in the air, Gyuhe Tianchu looked at his chest with an ugly expression. Pew! A few breaths later, a large amount of dragon blood spurted out as if it was free. A huge vertical hole appeared in his chest. His skin and flesh were lacerated, and his bones were visible. Although it did not hit, he was still injured. When faced with the successive attacks of Jiang Li's three offensive treasures, even Earth Immortal Realm experts were injured at the first possible moment. This was the immense combat strength enhancement of having many artifacts. After breaking through, Jiang Li inevitably swelled up a little. He brandished the mosquito spear and bloodthirsty trident as he attacked repeatedly. The strongest human emperor's battle halberd had to wait until Jiang Li recovered his spiritual qi. This is great. Looks like if I don't use my true ability, I won't be able to obtain the inheritance. I hope these artifacts are durable enough. Drip, drip. Jiang Li, who was pursuing the enemy in the black scale armor, suddenly heard a few sounds that sounded like sticky water droplets falling to the ground. Not far away from him, Gyuhe Tianchu, who had been dodging and retreating, suddenly surged with a lot of purple-black liquid that began to drip to the ground. Poison. Jiang Li had just raised his guard when a purple barrier quickly spread out with Gyuhe Tianchu as the center. In the blink of an eye, it almost enveloped most of the tortoise-shell dragon tomb. SSSS. The dragon bone fossils that covered the ground emitted a strange sound at the same time. Then, they began to soften and corrode. Not long after, they turned into purple-black poisonous mud. The same situation appeared on Jiang Li's body. His entire body emitted intense pain from the burning of flames, and wisps of white smoke emerged from the cracks in the body of the black scale armor. Jiang Li's resistance to poison was completely unable to resist the methods of the Earth Immortal Poison Dragon. Chapter 435, Forced to Cheat 2. At the same time, he also began to feel dizzy, his body was weak, and his joints felt stiff and painful. The flow of spiritual qi began to slow, and it was as if his chest was filled with sulfuric acid that was corroding every organ. In a short period of time, Jiang Li's body was covered in more than 10 poisonous statuses. The attack chasing after the other party was forced to stop. He had clearly not come into contact with the poison dripping from Gyuhe Tianchu's body, and he did not even smell the poison. However, it seemed that as long as he was within the range of this purple energy, he would continuously be poisoned. Moreover, if he stayed in this area for a long time, even his artifacts would be corroded and damaged. This was the poison domain. In next to no time, Jiang Li understood what he was facing. Although the power of a domain was rare, the enemy opposite him was an Earth Immortal, the master of the medium-grade Divine Judgment Dragon Island. It was not strange for such an existence to have a domain technique. The various poison statuses on his interface were still jumping out non-stop, causing his strength to continuously decrease. At this speed, even if he could eliminate a negative status every 5 seconds, he would not be able to keep up with the increased speed. What a vicious domain! This could not go on. With the other party's speed, he could not easily catch up to him. Sooner or later, he would be dragged down by these toxins. He had to leave the domain as soon as possible. Jiang Li turned around and wanted to pull away first, but the other party's speed was faster than his, and her strength was stronger than his. Whether he could pull away was not up to Jiang Li to decide. Danger! His spiritual perception frantically called the police. Behind him, he suddenly felt a sense of danger. He instinctively raised his halberd and swept it across. The spiritual chi that he had just accumulated only blasted apart one poisonous puppet. Then another faster impact attacked from the front. Jiang Li raised his shield to block, and the power of the earth immortal pure-blooded dragon collided with the shield. The hand holding the seal shield seemed to be on the verge of breaking. He was still sent flying. His spiritual perception alerted him again, behind him. The inverted domain instantly opened, stopping a purple-black poisonous spike in midair. He brandished the bloodthirsty trident and sent the poisonous spike flying. The cunning Xianxia actually did not give Jiang Li any chance to fight in close combat. Jiang Li released his inverted domain with all his might in an attempt to envelop the other party. However, in the poisonous domain, his inverted domain was actually suppressed, and the expansion range was greatly reduced. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation and was caught off guard. Seeing this familiar domain, Xianxia, who had seen the inverted domain before, immediately narrowed his eyes. Is that kind of domain unique to the dragon race? Why does the origin blood ancient leech have it, and so does the guardian of this ruin? Lord Dragonhead had already developed doubts about Jiang Li's identity as the guardian of the ruins. Looking at the inverted domain that enveloped him, Xianxia raised his hand and erupted with a destructive spiritual light that collided with the inverted domain, causing Jiang Li, who was the pivot, to be forced to endure even more pressure until he was blasted flying. Because of the continuous accumulation of poison in Jiang Li's body, his strength had always been weak, and the strength he could endure was inferior to when he was in the sea. Jiang Li, who was blasted flying, smashed into the ground, and only then did he notice that there was a sticky feeling behind him. In this space, it had unknowingly gathered into a poisonous swamp that was sufficient to cover his ankles. The dragon bones in this Ba-Zia tortoise shell and some other ancient buildings had already been corroded by the poison domain and turned into poisonous mud. The mud seeped into the cracks of the armor leaves, causing the poison status in Jiang Li's body to jump even faster. A moment later, the immaculate body and other cleansing statuses removed the poisonous mud on his body. However, before he could catch his breath, the poisonous mud around him surged, turning into poisonous dragons. They twisted their dirty bodies and pounced at him from all directions. Jiang Li had nowhere to dodge. He could only activate the inverted domain and repelled these poisonous dragons. However, after the poisonous dragons were reversed by the inverted domain, they continued to approach under Xianxia's control. More and more poisonous dragons surged towards Jiang Li under Xianxia's control. This caused the veins on Jiang Li's face to bulge, while large amounts of sweat broke out. His inverted domain was best at dealing with attacks. A single individual straight-line attack only needed to be reversed linearly. At that level, he could block the power of an earth immortal and be unscathed. However, if the total energy did not change, and the more attacks there were, the harder it was for Jiang Li to deal with them. The inverted domain hated liquid the most. The flow of liquid was 100 times more complicated than solid. In theory, if one practiced a high-level inverted domain, they could open a dry space under the deep sea and reverse every drop of seawater that tried to approach. However, the newbie Jiang Li was far from being able to reach this level. Facing more than 100 poisonous dragons that continuously pounced at him, even if Jiang Li used his full strength, these poisonous snakes were still continuously approaching. Originally, using 5 Earth rank and above artifacts at the same time was already something that 2 types of energy infusion status could not support in terrifying expenditure. The pressure of making the energy in Jiang Li's body unable to make ends meet was immense. Now, he had hundreds of poison statuses on his body, and he still had to use his full strength to execute the inverted domain. Even with the help of the parallel minds, Jiang Li had already reached his limit. Chapter 436, Forced to Cheat 3. After barely holding on for 15 minutes, 2 black blood threads flowed down Jiang Li's nostrils. The inverted domain could not last any longer and suddenly shattered. The domain was broken, causing Jiang Li to feel as if he had suffered a heavy blow. He spat out a mouthful of poisonous blood inside the black scale armor, and his status continued to fall. Without the resistance of the inverted domain, the hundreds of poisonous dragons that had already approached bit by bit pounced forward at the same time, forming a huge poisonous ball that completely enveloped Jiang Li. The sticky poison began to seep into the black scale armor, destroying Jiang Li's body without any fear. One after another, terrifying negative statuses were updated. Any one of them could take the life of a nascent soul cultivator. It was an unbearable burden on Jiang Li. Jiang Li wanted to jump out of the poisonous ball. At this moment, another green shadow flew out from Guhe Tianchu's hand. Taking advantage of the fact that the inverted domain was broken, it wrapped around Jiang Li's waist. This green shadow did not cause any harm to Jiang Li, nor did it have any other direct effect. However, it firmly dragged his body, making it extremely difficult for him to move an inch. The cage belt was Guhe Tianchu's Earth rank artifact. After being bound by this belt, it was as if he was locked in an invisible cage. Even with the power to drag a mountain, he could not leave the area. Guhe Tianchu's most disgusting combat method was to use the cage to trap the enemy on the spot, and then poison them to death with the domain. Once he was hit, it would be a hopeless situation. In the black scale armor, Jiang Li also had a helpless expression. He could not be complacent, he had been too arrogant. When facing an Earth immortal who really attacked, Jiang Li used these artifacts. Although their attack power and defense could barely meet the requirements, he still did not have much chance to resist. In a short period of time, he was already suppressed to this extent. If he was soaked by this poison, even he would be corroded to death. There was no other way, now he could only cheat. Jiang Li controlled the black scale armor to enlarge it, creating some space for himself. He pulled one of his right hands back from the armor. He reached into the coffin and took out 2 small crystal bottles that emitted light. Both bottles were filled with liquid. One bottle was filled with resplendent golden threads, and the other bottle was filled with boiling blood. After pouring the liquid from the 2 bottles into his throat, 2 pure energies suddenly erupted from Jiang Li's body. The top-grade spiritual qi and the power of chaos mixed together to form a peerless force. It was the 9 nether Asura power that belonged to Jiang Li alone. It was as if a spirit stone mine had been detonated. The energy that erupted blew away the sticky poison that covered his body. After Jiang Li broke through to the nascent soul realm, the energy impact his body could withstand was naturally greatly strengthened. It was just that he had just broken through, and had yet to update the 2 energy infusion statuses. Earlier in the coffin, he had gotten his clone to help him refine the top-grade spiritual liquid and top-grade blood of madness. Up until now, after consuming them, his body could already produce 2,000 points of top-grade spiritual qi per second and 2,000 points of top-grade power of chaos, 10 times that of before. This power was already enough to sustain the 5 artifacts in his body at the same time, and use the human emperor's battle halberd more frequently. Moreover, how powerful would the Kaiyu armor that could absorb 10 times the spiritual qi become? Restriction removed, Kaiyu armor. Chapter 437, Earth Immortal Escapes 1. The ferocious aura spread out again. Dark red muscles crawled out from under the black shield. After absorbing the large amount of 9 nether Usura power that gushed out of Jiang Li's body, they swelled up excitedly. In the blink of an eye, it had already covered Jiang Li's left hand. As expected of the muscles of the mighty figure Caillou, he could even absorb the special energy that Jiang Li had fused with the two worlds without any obstruction. The power that erupted when he entered was far greater than before. The tightened muscles exerted a large amount of pressure on the interior. However, this time, with the black scale armor in the middle, it helped Jiang Li endure this pressure, making him feel much better. It was a pity for the black scale armor. This earth-rank scale armor had been pierced by the broken-wing black mosquito's spear and had yet to be repaired. Now that it was enduring such a force, the connection between the armor leaves emitted a creaking sound that could not withstand the burden. The swelling muscles quickly crawled all over his body. Guhe Tianchu, who was hiding in the distance, frowned when he saw this. He recalled the scene of him being beaten up by this muscular monster. The tail at the back of his butt began to hurt again. The rune bandage tied to it quickly emitted a layer of blood color. He raised his head and grabbed at Jiang Li in the air. He controlled a large amount of poisonous liquid and mud again, forming a poisonous dragon wave that surged over in an attempt to stop this change. An even larger poisonous mud that was 10 times larger covered Jiang Li, and the strength of the poison domain was condensed, causing the poisonous ball to instantly transform into a round and smooth poisonous ball. Did it stop? 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths. Swoosh! 3 completely different forces instantly tore apart the poisonous ball, and the dark red Caillou's muscles appeared again. He had horns on his head and 4 arms on his back. His wild muscles contained the power to tear everything apart. He wantonly brandished the 3 weapons in his hand, erupting with continuous air waves that blew away the poisonous swamp poison dragons controlled by Dragon Head Guhe. Even the poison domain was on the verge of collapse under that might. He's even stronger than before. Guhe Tianchu, who hurriedly retreated, had a gloomy expression. The worst scenario had still appeared. Without the restriction of the last day's domain, although he could unleash his full strength unrestricted, this monster had also become stronger. Most importantly, this monster had been empty-handed before. Now, it had taken out a large number of powerful artifacts. Their combat strength could not be compared to before. Even so, the monster could not leave the spot. On second thought, Guhe Tianchu was still very confident in his cage. As long as he could stall this monster, he would still be invincible. As he thought this, he saw the muscular monster charge at him while dragging the green belt around its waist. Every step he took caused the entire tortoise shell and dragon tomb to tremble endlessly. It could be seen how terrifying the force behind each step was. Although the speed was not fast, it was enough to shock him. Unfortunately, because of the green belt, even the Caillou armor could only run on the ground and could not jump into the air. Caillou armor quickly discovered this problem. He stopped moving and no longer chased after the target in the sky. Instead, he assumed a strange posture while holding a shield. Boom, boom, boom. He waved the halberd in his hand, trident and spear, and suddenly knocked on the seal shield in his hand, emitting 3 explosive sounds. The explosion that struck the shield formed a visible ox-headed ripple in the air that spread upwards. Guhe Tianchu, who had been flying in the air and controlling the poisonous dragons to kill the enemy in search of an opportunity, was struck by this sound wave. Even though he had an earth-immortal body, his ears were directly pierced, and his consciousness became blurry. A moment later, when he recovered from his shock, a blood light had already arrived in front of him. Guhe Tianchu only had time to twist his body before the bloodthirsty trident stabbed into his abdomen, stabbing deeply into it. He immediately began to absorb the dragon blood. However, there was a black chain behind the bloodthirsty trident. The other part of the chain was in the hand of the Caillou armor. As the Kaiyu armor pulled, the dragon imprisoning lock immediately tightened and pulled Gyuhe Tianchu back from the air. What greeted him were the mosquito spear and the human emperor's battle halberd. Boom, 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 boom. Two ferocious weapons struck out, breaking through 5 defensive artifacts in a row before landing on Gyuhe Tianchu and sending him flying far away. If not for the 5 profound rank artifacts blocking in front of him, he would have lost half his life. The Kaiyu armor raised its hand to throw the spear again, but Jiang Li, who was hiding inside, was anxious. Just as the spear was about to throw, Jiang Li hurriedly exerted strength and barely stopped this wastrel action. The spear only flew a few feet and stabbed into the ground in front of him. He heaved a sigh of relief. The Kaiyu armor was too bold. The degree of refinement of these artifacts in Jiang Li's hand was not high. If he threw them out, he did not have the confidence to summon them back under the obstruction of an earth immortal. Now that the Kaiyu armor was bound by the green belt, he could not run fast. Did that strike cause much damage? If Gyuhe Tianchu snatched the spear and ran, he would not have a place to cry. The closed eyes on the sealed shield opened slightly. After releasing the anti-cultivation domain and temporarily weakening the power of the Kaiyu armor, Jiang Li controlled the armor with all his might to grab the spear back. He turned the spear tip and stabbed it into the green belt around his waist. Chapter 438, Earth Immortal Escapes 2. Unfortunately, this belt was invisible and formless, as if it was not the main body. Even the spirit-devouring effect of the spear could not touch it. Unfortunately, if the main body of the artifact was stabbed by this spear, the spiritual chi of an earth-rank artifact would be unavoidable. He could only give up on this simple idea and turn to hook the other end of the dragon imprisoning lock onto the end of the mosquito spear. This way, as long as he did not throw out both weapons, he could pull them back. The eyeballs on the seal shield closed again. Jiang Li relaxed his body and no longer disturbed the battle of the Kaiyu armor. The Kaiyu armor was a little strange about what had happened just now, but it did not care much and stared at Gyuhe Tianchu. The combat instincts of this Kai's muscles were not bad, but it could not identify enemies or use artifacts. Before he could completely control this armor, its use was very limited. Therefore, Jiang Li had to arrange such a suitable sealed battlefield. After removing the restrictions on the armor, he was only responsible for providing spiritual chi and energy. He did not care about anything else. He calmed his mind and opened the status panel to deal with the more than 800 negative statuses hanging on it. This was still the situation of having War Clear Spring and some other anti-poison healing statuses that had already resisted and dispersed many poisons. It could be seen how powerful this poison domain was. It was impossible to guard against. He removed one in 5 seconds without stopping. It would take him more than an hour to completely remove the poison statuses on his body. Damned brat, I am the benefactor of humans. I carried the mountain for King Yu and calmed the water. As the successor of the human emperor, you actually repaid kindness with ingratitude. How can you imprison me? I'm the 6th son of the ancestral dragon. You possess the bloodline of the dragon race. You secretly harmed the soul of your ancestor. You're unfilial and disloyal. While Jiang Li was focused on removing the poison, deep voices roared continuously in his consciousness. His mind sank into his consciousness. His gaze immediately saw 2 strange figures tied up by chains under the 5-element sword peak. There was a huge tortoise with a dragon head that was flickering with golden light, and a crystal heart that beat from time to time. They were the remnant soul of the dragon son Wuxia, and the earth vein spirit of the Shu Mountain 5 elements peak. Logically speaking, the composition of the 2 chains was neither exquisite nor powerful. These 2 guys should be able to escape from the chains in minutes. However, because of the status on the interface, they could not escape no matter what. Senior Wuxia, you look especially energetic today. Ever since this huge tortoise was tricked by him, it had been hiding in its shell and pretending to be asleep. Today, it was very lively. He looked at the interface. Sure enough, there were some changes in the status of spirit summoning Wuxia. The effect of increasing his strength was rising at 2 points each time. The interface indicated that he could update his status. It seemed that after returning to its tortoise shell and obtaining the support of the power source, this Wuxia's strength had become stronger. You're asking why are the two of you locked up here? Didn't you communicate with each other? Senior 5 Element Sword Peak, what do you think? Jiang Li looked at the beating crystal heart. Being stared at by Jiang Li, the crystal heart seemed to have stopped in fear. After a moment of silence, an aged voice sounded. I was bewitched by the evil spirits in the demon-subduing pagoda and tried to deceive you to possess your body. I committed a heinous crime. I've come to my senses now. Please forgive me, young master. This earth spirit of the Shu Mountain 5 Elements Peak was quite tactful with his words. He was very sincere in admitting his mistake. After all, the ghost lantern cold flame was not to be trifled with. Although the status was fixed and it could not burn him to death, the pain would not be reduced at all. After being burned for 7 days and 7 nights, he completely became obedient. Look, he's so sensible. Jiang Li glanced at Wuxia before continuing to look at the crystal heart. In that case, why don't Senior 5 Element Sword Peak return to your profession? What do you think? Jiang Li waved his hand and immediately summoned an earth vein not far away. This was the earth vein that Jiang Li had absorbed into his body when he was fusing the 5 cores. However, Jiang Li had never had the time to sort it out. Logically speaking, he had to plant it into the 5 Elements mountain in his Tao foundation to unleash its full strength. This is a complete earth vein. An old voice sounded from the crystal heart, filled with deep shock. The 5 Elements Earth spirit clearly knew that they were currently in Jiang Li's mental world, but a complete earth vein had actually appeared here. This was completely against his common sense as an earth spirit. That's right. In the future, I will get more earth veins. These things need to be handed over to an experienced earth spirit to sort out. Senior, are you interested? Jiang Li threw the crystal heart into the earth vein. The long-lost feeling made the 5 Elements earth spirit tremble in comfort. Although he was still bound by the chains, he also had a certain amount of freedom and could directly soak in the earth vein. Compared to before, this was already like heaven. Before he was sealed by the Shu Mountain Sword cultivators, he did not like to run around. He had always been nurtured as a recluse. Although he had lost his freedom now, if he recognized reality, he could still live quite well. Moreover, this young master Jiang Li was actually able to intercept and capture the earth vein. Chapter 439, Earth Immortal Escapes 3. In the future, he might even be able to develop the 5 Element Sword Peak in his consciousness into a true paradise. Just thinking about it made him a little excited. The earth spirit that had been frightened by Jiang Li earlier was completely convinced. Thank you, young master. The old man's grateful voice sounded from the crystal heart. Jiang Li waved his hand and hid the earth vein again. On the spot, only the glowing Wuxia was left. Senior Wuxia, no one will accompany you in this prison in the future. All of this is your fault for trying to possess me. Even if you helped King Yu mitigate the flood, my actions will not be a problem. It's impossible for me to let you out now, but if you cooperate, I can make Senior live more comfortably. There's only one chance, there's no turning back. In the outside world, the Kaiyu armor ran on the ground and chased after Xianxia. The poisoned dragon's domain could poison Jiang Li, but it could not do anything to Kaiyu's muscles. Unfortunately, the suppressed Kaiyu armor could not catch up to the earth immortals who were moving around. Neither party could do anything to the other. It was not until the entire Wuxia tortoise shell began to glow. Under the full force of an earth immortal level battle, the 10,000-year-old stone filth that had not changed even began to crack. Layers of skin peeled off, revealing the inside. This was a tortoise shell that was huge enough to fit a city. Its surface was covered in bold and elegant patterns. Among the natural Tao patterns, there was also a map of the 8 mountains, and the water of the Fen River and the Yellow River. They were the legendary water channels created by the ancient Great Yu to subdue the flood. This tortoise shell belonged to Wuxia, one of the 9 sons of the ancestral dragon. Back then, because he had captured Wuxia's remnant soul, their negotiation failed, so he had not been able to obtain the dragon race secret technique that Wuxia mentioned and this tortoise shell. It was not until a while ago that he borrowed the power of the sea giant race to dig this huge tortoise shell out of the deep sea canyon. It was transported here as the battlefield he had prepared. Only the Wuxia tortoise shell could withstand a battle at the Earth Immortal realm and not collapse easily. Moreover, as long as Wuxia's remnant soul cooperated, this battlefield would give him a huge advantage. An inexplicable gravity suddenly appeared in the tortoise shell space, causing the Earth Immortals in the air to feel abnormally heavy. They began to be unable to fly and flew lower and lower. Finally, he landed on the ground. He could only face the rampaging muscle monster. 1 halberd, 1 trident, and 1 spear. The might of the 3 was extremely great, and if it was in Jiang Li's hand, he might dare to forcefully receive it. However, in the hands of the Kaiyu armor, he would be injured or even die immediately. 3-colored light swept through space. Although this was the first time he had held these 3 weapons, he could unleash the different styles of the 3 weapons with a wave of his hand. The battle technique was profound to the limit, suppressing Xianxia until he was forced back repeatedly. Kaiyu was the strongest general under the Flame Emperor during the primordial world. He even had the upper hand in the war with Yellow Emperor Xianxia. Although the current Kaiyu armor was only made from a few muscles, it was far from what Jiang Li could compare to. Xianxia, who was fleeing in the tortoise-shell dragon tomb, could only take out artifacts and collide with the weapons held by the Kaiyu armor. However, ordinary profound-rank artifacts were truly too powerless in such a battle. Every time they collided, he would definitely lose one of them. Such a speed of destruction made even Xianxia feel heartache. Soon, Xianxia also unleashed his true strength. Ignoring his injuries, he transformed into a poison dragon. He used his 1,000-feet body, dragon claw, and dragon tooth to fight against the Kaiyu armor. In the battle on the underwater island, his tail had been torn off and had yet to grow out. In close combat, it was as if he had lost an arm. The impact was not small. However, after being stimulated by the pain and becoming bloodthirsty, he still erupted with the terrifying combat strength of a pure-blooded dragon. The 2 sides fought crazily, dragon blood and dragon flesh scattering on the ground. A terrifying sea tremor in the outside world spread out with the tortoise shell and dragon tomb as the center, and it swept through an area of 500 km. Even the dragon transformation island in the distance was affected. This battle lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. In the end, the poisoned dragon, which was covered in injuries, was beaten out of its crazy state. It discovered that the flesh, blood, and bones on its body were less than half of their original size. Its physical condition was extremely terrible. There was not a single piece of good flesh from the inside out. It was extremely close to death. The dignified Earth Immortal finally gave up fighting in the fear of death and turned around to escape. Chapter 440, Strange Disease, Become Stronger While Doing Nothing 1. Did I finally win? Jiang Li, who was hiding inside the Kaiyu armor, was a little uncertain when he heard the calm commotion outside. The Kaiyu armor was still running and trying to pursue him, but the green belt around his waist severely delayed his speed. Even if the other party was also restricted by Wuxia's tortoise shell, it was impossible for the Kaiyu armor to catch up to the Earth Immortal who was trying to escape. Soon the dragon flew farther and farther away. Only when he could no longer sense Xianxia's aura did Jiang Li heave a sigh of relief, and his entire body went limp in his armor. During these 3 days, even though it was not Jiang Li who was personally fighting, he had also endured extremely great danger and pressure. This was because, at this moment, the dark red muscles wrapped tightly around his body again. Even with the naked eye, the boundaries of the two types of flesh could no longer be distinguished. The black scale armor that was originally between the Kaiyu armor and him had already disappeared without a trace. As the battle continued, Jiang Li gradually discovered the reason why the Kaiyu armor had never appeared in legends. This terrifying armor was still a dangerous, semi-finished product. There was still one flaw that had not been resolved, and that was that he could not control it. It was one thing to rely on instincts to fight and not listen to the master's orders. However, as the dark red muscles absorbed more and more spiritual qi, the strength would also become stronger, as if there was no limit to it. This was not all good because its savage instincts would also increase. Its greed would grow exponentially. For example, Jiang Li, who was emitting an alluring aura at all times inside the armor. While the Kaiyu armor was still fighting the poison dragon in the outside world, the muscles in the armor began to greedily absorb all the nutrients in his body. This included the black scale armor that blocked Jiang Li and Kaiyu's muscles. After that, Jiang Li experienced what was called outrageous. An extremely special liquid metal seeped out of the Kaiyu armor. It actually directly rotted and corroded Jiang Li's black scale armor, and it completely ate the earth-rank armor that had accompanied him for a long time. Quintet Qi Essence Copper, this was the name of that liquid metal. Jiang Li had seen it in appraisal before. This Kaiyu armor was mainly made of Kaiyu's muscles and Quintet Qi Essence Copper. The Quintet Qi Essence Copper was a special metal refined by the Kaiyu tribe with the 5 elements Qi. In ancient times, the Kaiyu tribe was famous for their metal smelting technique. The weapons and armor they forged were completely inferior to the divine weapons at that time. This was also an important reason why they could repeatedly gain the upper hand in the battle with Emperor Xianxia. The Kaiyu sword was even more invincible, if not for the fact that Yellow Emperor Xianxia had obtained the legendary Xianxia sword. It was hard to say who would have one in the end. He did not expect to see it today. Earth-rank artifacts were like chickens and dogs in front of that kind of thing, and did not have the slightest ability to resist. After breaking through the black scale armor, the dark red muscles no longer had any obstruction and connected to Jiang Li's body again, starting to recklessly extract vitality and spiritual qi. He even sent the ferocious wills into his consciousness again. At this moment, there was no Daji chanting the 3 sovereign scripture to suppress him. If not for the fact that his nascent soul was protected by the merit runes, he might have already fallen to a demonic nascent. This situation made Jiang Li suffer greatly. However, with the powerful enemy in front of him, he had to continue fighting in the Kaiyu armor. He could only endure it for the time being. After being slapped by such a greedy fellow for 3 days and 3 nights, even Jiang Li was slightly unable to endure it. Activate the anti-cultivation domain. As soon as Guhe Tianchu left, he immediately controlled the shield. The closed eyes on it opened, revealing the anti-cultivation spiritual bead inside. The special domain that expelled spiritual qi landed on the Kaiyu armor, causing the armor that had completely turned into a monster to lose 40 to 50% of its strength. However, Jiang Li was shocked. In the past, under the anti-cultivation domain, Kaiyu's muscles could only maintain about 20% of its strength. Why could it retain so much this time? Most importantly, he could not limit the power of Kaiyu's muscles to a certain extent. The sealed shield could not forcefully seal it again. Damn it, in these 3 days, he had allowed this flesh to absorb too much power. Even the anti-cultivation domain could not disperse it in a short period of time. Moreover, feeling the danger, Kaiyu's muscles instinctively struggled. More and more flesh and blood stabbed into Jiang Li's body, absorbing the energy and vitality even more crazily, causing his body to visibly wither inside. The absorption speed this time was much more terrifying than when he was in the Xianxia tomb. If this continued, he would probably be sucked to death. With determination in his heart, Jiang Li controlled the anti-cultivation spiritual bead to weaken its might, leaving only a thin crack. Although this would weaken the power of the anti-cultivation domain, it could allow Jiang Li to control it more accurately. It would only restrict the Kaiyu armor and not affect the other artifacts and Jiang Li himself. Then, he relied on the fact that the Kaiyu armor was brainless and could not react to his internal movements. He exerted strength from the inside and spun the bloodthirsty trident and the broken mosquito spear in his hand before stabbing his arms. The two Earth-rank artifacts had just been inserted half an inch when they were blocked by the strong muscles and Quintet Chi Essence Copper. Fortunately, this was enough to satisfy the requirements of this demonic artifact and magic artifact. After activating the two weapons with all his might, Jiang Li also began to extract the spiritual qi and vitality in the Kaiyu armor and instilled them into his body through these two artifacts. Chapter 441, Strange Disease, becomes stronger while doing nothing too. The Kaiyu battle armor absorbed the energy in Jiang Li, while he extracted its energy again and instilled it into his body. The two formed a cycle, maintaining a temporary balance. The Kaiyu armor realized that it was attacked and looked around in confusion. However, it still could not find the culprit and could only stay vigilant. If it was under normal circumstances, Jiang Li would definitely be at a disadvantage in such an exchange. However, with the help of the anti-cultivation spiritual bead, Jiang Li relied on the might of the demonic artifact and magic artifact to slowly gain the upper hand. However, after Jiang Li's spiritual qi and vitality flowed into the Kaiyu armor and was extracted again, it seemed to have changed. At the beginning, it was not obvious, but as the cycle increased, the color of Jiang Li's 9 Nether Usra force started to become deeper and deeper, and it carried an ancient aura. After being in a stalemate for a few hours, the muscles on the two arms that were stabbed finally could not withstand it. After shriveling, they turned back into a pile of dark red muscles that were absorbed by the sealed shield. After the muscles fell off, Jiang Li's hands were exposed. Red muscles wrapped around the jade-like bones, exposing them to the air. In the past 3 days, the skin on his body had already been eaten by the Kaiyu armor. He looked extremely terrifying. However, if Jiang Li could see it now, he would discover that there were many dark red muscles mixed evenly in his muscles, interweaving with his main muscles and unable to separate. This was the flesh that the Kaiyu armor had pierced into his body to extract energy. Perhaps because it was too deep, it was not retracted together. It was not until the skin on the surface grew back with the help of War Clear Spring and other statuses that the strange double-colored muscles were covered. Jiang Li turned around and stabbed the two greedy weapons into the other parts of his body, the other two arms, then his feet, torso, and finally his head. 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours. Time passed bit by bit. Finally, the muscles were sealed again. Jiang Li's head that did not even have any eyelids or hair was exposed. Only then did he breathe in fresh air again. The skin on his head quickly grew back. He felt as if he had been reborn. This Kaiyu armor was really too dangerous. Just to store this armor, one had to use a divine artifact like the anti-cultivation spiritual bead. Using it was even more dangerous. The battle where he freed the Kaiyu armor was indeed shocking. He almost completed the feat of slaying the dragon and killing the Dragon Transformation Island's dragon head. However, the loss was also huge. He had directly lost an extremely useful Earth-rank armor. In the future, he could no longer rely on the defense of his artifact to casually court death. Fortunately, after this round he still had some gains. Jiang Li looked ahead. At the center of the tortoise shell, a large amount of dragon blood had gathered to form a pond, and it was still emitting a dignified aura at all times. He released the origin blood ancient leech that he had stored in the coffin. This insect had been fed the 9 nether earth fruit by Jiang Li when it was at its weakest. Even if it became stronger now, it was unable to go against Jiang Li's will. Earlier, it had transformed into a dragon halfway because Jiang Li did not agree, so it forcefully interrupted its transformation opportunity and stopped everything, causing it to look even more strange now that it was not a dragon. This was because letting this insect transform into a dragon would expend a large amount of dragon blood. That was something Jiang Li was unwilling to see. He did not plan to spend another 1,000 years accumulating so much dragon blood. After the huge worm smelled the dragon blood, it immediately pounced into the pond. More than 10 mouthpieces grew out of its body and began to extract the blood inside like a water pump. It was not afraid of the poisonous blood at all. In the previous battle, Xianxia had suffered almost fatal injuries, and he had lost more than half of the dragon's blood and flesh. His 500 years of accumulation had probably been lost in this pool. After the origin blood ancient leech absorbed his dragon blood and purified it, it should be able to reach the refinement conditions for the top-grade dragon transformation pill. Even Jiang Li yearned for medicinal pills that could allow the dragon bloodline to grow rapidly. After squatting on the ground and resting for a while, his shriveled body slowly filled up under various recovery statuses. His face became healthy and rosy, and all the negative statuses on the interface had been removed. However, Jiang Li discovered that something was amiss. His body had clearly recovered to its optimal state. Why was he still continuously absorbing spiritual qi and vitality? It was like a bottomless hole that did not stop for a long time. Could it be because he had been beaten for 3 days and 3 nights that his body developed an issue? Where was the foundation damaged? Would he continuously lose spiritual qi and vitality? When he thought up to here, Jiang Li stood up anxiously and wanted to inspect his body more carefully. However, in the next moment, his head directly collided with the dome of the tortoise-shell dragon tomb. This collision stunned him. He only wanted to stand up. Why did he jump so high? He was quite familiar with this feeling. It was as if his strength had increased too quickly, causing him to be unable to withdraw freely. In the past, when Jiang Li had just stepped into cultivation, such a situation often appeared. Every time he fixed his status for a day, he had to adapt for a long time. However, as his mental cultivation increased, his basic strength also became stronger. It was already extremely rare for him to have such an explosive increase that even he could not control. This situation had not happened in a long time. He opened the interface again and realized that his attributes had actually doubled in strength. One had to know that in the anti-cultivation domain, he had broken through his apertures by chance, causing his physical strength to increase greatly. At that time, his attributes had already more than doubled. After breaking through to the nascent soul realm, his various attributes would continue to increase exponentially. At that time, he would still be able to control his body very well. However, it had only been a few days, but it had actually doubled again. Where did this portion of power come from? With his current strength, could he not slap his previous self to death? Just as he was staring at his interface and thinking hard, he discovered that the strength attribute actually jumped up a little again in front of him. What? Jiang Li immediately closed his eyes and looked into his body. Soon, he discovered Kai Yu's muscles that were intertwined with his muscles. It was precisely these muscles that had been severed after stabbing into his body that were still absorbing his spiritual qi and vitality at a steady pace. He clenched his fists. When his muscles constricted, these dark red muscles constricted at the same time. It seemed that they did not treat him as an outsider at all. This was also the source of Jiang Li's sudden increase in strength. These muscles were deeply rooted in his body, directly connecting his bones and joints, covering every corner. Moreover, from the looks of it, as time passed, they would intertwine and fuse more and more thoroughly. Even if he steeled his heart and pulled out the pieces one by one, it was almost impossible to completely remove them all. Jiang Li frowned and did not immediately panic. He calmly considered the pros and cons of this chain. He had already seen the benefits. These muscles would bring him double the strength increase. Moreover, they would continue to grow as he absorbed spiritual qi. The drawback was obvious. These muscles would continuously absorb Jiang Li's energy and vitality. To ordinary cultivators, this was definitely a parasitic curse. He had to eat a large number of medicinal pills every day to make up for this loss. In the end, he would die because his spiritual qi and vitality had dried up. However, to Jiang Li, the speed at which these muscles absorbed was less than 5% of his current recovery speed. It basically did not affect him at all. In terms of whether he would encounter danger of possession again, it was a lump of muscle that even the ghost lantern cold flame could not burn anything. It was very clean and did not have any other consciousness. Rubbing the corners of his mouth that could not help but curl up, Jiang Li could only helplessly accept this reality. He had probably gotten a strange disease that made him stronger while doing nothing. Chapter 442, Visiting the Sea Giants 1. Just as Jiang Li was checking his spoils of war in the tortoise-shell dragon tomb, Xianxia, who had transformed back into a human and was on the verge of death, went back to the dragon transformation island with difficulty. Before flying into the range of the storm, he dispersed the escape light on his body and used a diversion technique to conceal his sorry state. Next, he would need a very, very long time to heal his injuries. That would be his weakest moment. With the sect culture of the Dragon Transformation Island, he could not find many people he could trust in such a huge, medium-sized divine judgment faction. Not to mention that the pirates of the Dragon Transformation Island had countless enemies. Once outsiders knew of his current terrible state, danger and trouble would come to him one after another. That was something that the current him could not face. Therefore, even if his body was continuously collapsing and worsening, he still had to squeeze out spiritual qi to cast the illusion technique. It was like a puffer fish, inflating its body to intimidate the enemy through bluffing. After passing through the storm area that had already raised the wind wall again, he almost thought that he had come to the wrong place. In this sea area, more than half of the originally rich and beautiful islands had disappeared, and the remaining ones were also beyond recognition. A large number of sea beasts and dragon beast corpses floated on the surface of the sea, emitting a rotting stench. In the center of the Dragon Transformation Island, there were more than 10 mountain-sized sea giant corpses lying on the ground. Their blood flowed down, forming several trickling rivers that dyed the nearby seawater into a strange pink. Looking at the top of the mountain, the skull palace that had originally been used as a spoils of war to show the power and prestige of the painting Dragon Island had indeed disappeared. Those sea giants, I should have let them die. This scene made Xianxia gnash his teeth in anger. A few more blood pillars shot out from his body. In the palace, there was a large amount of his resources and treasures. Now that the sea giants had taken the opportunity to rob him and move away with the skull palace, the accumulation would naturally be lost. Without those spiritual materials and precious medicines, his recovery speed would definitely be greatly reduced. Even if everything went smoothly, it would already be fortunate that he could repair his immortal body in 100 years. Moreover, he discovered that the spiritual qi environment inside the Wall of Storms, which was originally more than 5 times higher than the outside world, was also continuously flowing away. Perhaps the sudden battle and the collapse of the underwater mystic realm had damaged the earth vein of the Dragon Transformation Island. If it could not be repaired, perhaps this place would no longer be suitable as a sect encampment in the future. This was another heavy blow to him. Troubled things happened one after another. He did not know if it was his retribution. He glanced at the remaining higher-ups of the Dragon Transformation Island who were gathered in a barely intact hall. Some were healing their injuries, while others were healing others. Fortunately, they're not all dead. Xianxia heaved a sigh of relief. If he was at his peak, he naturally would not care about the lives of these subordinates. However, he was heavily injured now. Once he entered seclusion, it was impossible for him to come out easily. At that time, He would need these subordinates to gather materials for him and refine healing pills. He flew into the hall. When the many elders who were healing saw the dragon head return, they all revealed complicated and fearful expressions. They stood up and bowed to Gyuhe Tianchu. They did not dare to blame the other party for not protecting the sect. Instead, they were more afraid. With this dragon head's personality, it was very likely that he would take out his anger and cruelly punish these subordinates. Fortunately, he did not do this time, because if he killed again, there would really be no one left to use. He flew into the crowd and discovered that the ones who were protected in the center before he returned were the captain of the Second Fleet, Xianxia. There was a mortal girl without any spiritual chi on her body and a middle-aged woman lying in a coffin. Gyuhe Tianchu's eyes sized them up. While everyone lowered their heads and did not dare to look at him, the mortal girl dared to raise her head and look into his eyes. Just her courage was enough to make people look up to her. From the bloodline aura of the mortal girl, he quickly knew the identity of the girl in front of him. Previously, he had seen her appearance in the underwater island through the monitoring spirit stone. To be able to survive in that dangerous environment, this daughter was very lucky. "What's your name?" Gyuhe Jianmo looked at her father, who she had never seen before, but there was no warmth in her heart. After calmly saying her name, a token carved from dragon teeth was thrown into her arms. That was the young master token left behind after the death of Gyuhe Macheng. It represented authority and benefits that could allow one to ascend to the heavens in a single step. "Gyuhe Jianmo, in the future you will be my daughter, the only young lady of the island." With Gyuhe Tianchu personally acknowledging it, the surrounding higher-ups all bowed and called out in unison, "Young lady." Then the dragon head's gaze landed on Captain Xianxia. "Captain Xianxia of the Second Fleet, in view of your contributions to protect the Dragon Transformation Island and your cooperation in assassinating Zhuhu, I can let bygones be bygones. In the future, assist Jianmo with all your might to rebuild the Dragon Transformation Island and deal with the matters at sea to make up for your mistakes. From today onwards, I will enter seclusion and break through to a higher realm. No matter what, don't disturb me." As expected, Gyuhe Tianchu acknowledged Jianmo as the young lady, and for the first time, gave her even more authority than the original two young masters. Chapter 443, Visiting the Sea Giants 2. In any case, now that the Origin Blood ancient leech had fled, his original two sons were already dead, and he needed a long period of seclusion to heal his injuries. He utterly did not have the time or energy to deal with the trivial matters of the Dragon Transformation Island. The Dragon Transformation Island needed a spokesperson on the surface. This daughter who was sent to him naturally became the best choice. Although she was still immortal, it was not a problem to be a puppet. Xianxia, who he had planned to kill earlier, was also kept alive. In order to intimidate the sea, high-level combatants at the Soul Formation realm were indispensable. With such strength now, the Dragon Transformation Island only had Xianxia, and the captain of the First Fleet stationed at the front line. At the very least, he had to keep this female pirate with a chaotic private life. At most, he would let her go to the front line instead of staying on the island anymore. After saying that, he left a few more instructions before disappearing on the spot. He transformed into an illusion and entered the sect's seclusion chamber. Under the cover of the illusion technique, his main body opened a secret room on the island that outsiders did not know. After completely sealing the entrance of the secret room, the illusion technique covering his body flickered a few times and completely failed, revealing his original appearance. The body below the waist had already completely disappeared. The organs and intestines in the abdomen were blocked by a thin layer of spiritual chi light membrane, so they did not pour out all at once. The remaining half of his body was also missing bits and pieces. It was bumpy like 100 sows had chewed on him, and he did not look like a living person at all. Compared to the Kaiyu armor that was invulnerable to weapons, water, and poison, The originally powerful dragon body seemed so fragile. After 3 days and 3 nights of fighting, he had already become so miserable. However, his poisoned domain, claws and teeth, did not leave any obvious traces on the enemy. How could such a monster exist in the world? After pouring out a pile of medicinal pills from his storage artifact and casually grabbing a few to stuff into his mouth, Tianchu fell into a difficult state of healing. On the other side, Jiang Li was also sitting on the head of the wood dragon Rayquaza after the battle, leisurely enjoying the salty sea breeze. The terrifying toxins that should have plagued him to the end of the world took some time to be completely cleansed by the power of the statuses. The other injuries on his body also recovered quickly under the treatment. Since he started cultivating, Jiang Li had never tasted the after effects of a battle. He casually took out pieces of cut dragon meat from the coffin and threw them into Rayquaza's mouth. This exaggerated wooden dragon was like a puppy as it let out fawning cries. Every time it ate a piece of dragon meat, Rayquaza would involuntarily squirm a few times. Its body became even longer and more handsome. The dragon scales that were originally leaves on its body also fell off piece by piece, growing true scales. In those 3 days, Tianchu had experienced more than just being cut into pieces. The dragon flesh that had fallen into Ba Zia's tortoise shell could be calculated by 1,000 tons. After eating these immortal-level pure-blooded dragon meat, they could elevate Rayquaza to the soul formation realm. The main body was a branch of the spiritual root of heaven and earth, the 9 nether wood. If it could transform into a dragon by swallowing the dragon flesh, then the combat strength and potential of Rayquaza would definitely be extraordinary. After all, it was the first wood demon that he had awakened and was his mount. It could not be weak. One hand fed him meat, and Jiang Li's other hand held a communication spirit stone. He was asking Xianxia about the current situation of the Dragon Transformation Island. Originally, Jiang Li planned to let the top spy, Xianxia, retire successfully. After bringing the ground control flag to meet up with him, she could fill up the hidden rock army and continue working hard for a greater cause. However, after discovering the tragic state of Tianchu's escape, he changed his mind. After the Earth Control flag sucked away the high-grade Earth vein of the Dragon Transformation Island, it was directly summoned back. No one could snatch the treasure given by the human emperor. As for Xianxia, Jiang Li took a certain risk and let her stay. As expected, under that state of near death, even the craziest person had to maintain a little rationality for the sake of their lives. As the few remaining top-notch combat forces of the Dragon Transformation Island, not only was Xianxia not dead, but she had also successfully obtained authority. One had to know that the War of the Great Mountain Alliance was under the jurisdiction of the Dragon Transformation Island. With Xianxia and Jian Mo, the young masters of the Dragon Transformation Island, cooperating internally, it could bring Jiang Li a lot of convenience. With the blood-fighting arena as a precedent, Jiang Li was confident that it would not be long before he could empty the entire Dragon Transformation Island. Tianchu was far inferior to Vemicitrin. When the time was ripe, Jiang Li could even come up with a question like, why did the dragon head rebel? Perhaps due to the influence of the high-grade merit blessing, everything went very smoothly. A moment later, Jiang Li smiled and put away the communication spirit stone. In front of him, a boiling hot sea appeared. Jiang Li patted the wooden dragon beneath him and made Rayquaza lower its height, avoiding the thick steam clouds and flying deeper. He looked at the water surface. Sure enough, the sea area here seemed to have been burned. A large number of bubbles would surge from the bottom of the sea to the surface at any time. That was because there was a large number of active underwater volcanoes at the bottom of this sea. The eruption of these underwater volcanoes and the abundant geothermal heat made the water temperature of the seawater maintain above 90 degrees all year round. A portion of the magma that was erupting would boil directly. A large amount of scorching water vapor rose into the air and formed clouds, causing rain to continuously fall in this sea area all year round. The environment here was not suitable for the survival of most ordinary creatures, but it also gave rise to many magical ecosystems. There were even many plants that could quickly grow by absorbing heat. My friend, you're finally here. Welcome to the burning archipelago as a guest. Jiang Li did not hide his arrival. The increasingly exaggerated Rayquaza was quickly noticed by the owner of this place. In the depths of the fog, a deep voice sounded like a gust of wind blowing through the valley. As a terrifying hand pushed aside the steam clouds, a huge figure covered the sky. Its size was not inferior to the wind protection giant in the headquarters of the Great Mountain Alliance. This was a sea giant. Through the even larger skull he wore, Jiang Li could tell that this was the new king of the sea giant race. This was because, according to the tradition of the sea giant, their king's coronation ceremony was to wear the head of the previous king as a crown. Jiang Li's altitude increased. As his vision widened, he could see that there were more than 100 huge existences standing behind this giant king. Behind him was a huge throne that was being built. New ruler of the sea giant race, I am Jiang Li, and I am very honored to visit the burning archipelago. This island was also the residence of the sea giant race. Jiang Li helped the sea giant retrieve the head of the previous king, giving them the chance to trample on the enemy's home with their feet and allow them to complete the coronation and reunite. To these big fellows, they owed Jiang Li a huge favor. Although everyone knew that Jiang Li had his own goal and was using them as cannon fodder, this was not the case in the end. The sea giant obtained true help and benefits. If Jiang Li was weak, both sides would naturally tacitly laugh it off. However, with Jiang Li's current strength, not to mention directly destroying the entire sea giant race, it was not a problem for him to take down their current giant king. With strength that could negotiate with the sea giant race, it would be a little unreasonable if they did not come to accept the thank you gift. As soon as the war with the Dragon Transformation Island ended, Jiang Li rode Rayquaza here. He had heard that the sea giant race was a natural craftsman and the best weapon refinement masters in the sea. Jiang Li happened to have some work that he needed their help with. Chapter 444, Arm Wrestling the Giant King 1. Jiang Li, my friend, it's a pity that you didn't see my coronation. When I wore the crown, the entire sea cheered for me. I am the king of the sea giant race, Quigon. But you happen to be at our banquet. Come quickly and let us entertain our friends. Every word that this sea giant king said sounded like a bolt of lightning exploding in the air. This made Jiang Li, who had sharp hearing, feel very uncomfortable. This was the first time they had met. After the superficial pleasantries, the sea giant king enthusiastically invited him to participate in the banquet. The two giants beside him carried the throne made of underwater lava. After sinking it into the sea to cool down, they carried the throne that was purely for the sake of ceremony and walked back together. With the mountain-like size of the sea giant, it was difficult to build a house that could accommodate them. Fortunately, the giants had skin that was tougher and thicker than the city wall, so they did not need the protection of houses. They used the sky as a blanket and the ground as a bed. On the ground there was a mountain. Wind, rain, sun, and tide were all their nutrients. What an easy race to raise. As the fog dissipated, an island covered in pitch-black soil appeared in his eyes. However, in such a scorching island that was surrounded by steam all year round and should have no vitality, life flourished. Giant green plants filled with vitality grew on the island. Any tree here could grow to the height of a giant king's knee. Huge fruits that did not conform to human common sense hung on these trees for others to pluck. Jiang Li could tell that it was not a precious spiritual plant. It was only an ordinary plant that slowly evolved because of the living environment. This was a black soil island formed by the eruption of an underwater volcano. The soil was rich, and there was constant rain all year round. After the steam and dark clouds dispersed, the sunlight would be even hotter than in the desert. The plants here also had the magical ability to absorb heat as energy. This was why ordinary plants in the ecosystem could grow to this height after many generations of reproduction. New plants in different ecosystems were very valuable to Jiang Li. The magical heat-absorbing plant could optimize the seeds in his hand after a little cultivation and make his wood art stronger. Perhaps they could even escape the weakness of flames. After casually gathering some seeds, he followed the giant king forward. Thunderous laughter sounded from ahead. It was the highest and largest volcano on the island. More than 1,000 giant commoners were gathered at the foot of the volcano. They were clearly much smaller than giant King Quigon. The height varied from his calf to his waist. Among them, 2 giants who looked like chefs climbed up the volcano and poured the things in the 2 large baskets into the volcano. They stirred it a few times and waited for a moment before fishing out a large amount of cooked or burnt sea beast meat. They poured down the mountain of meat and let the food roll down the foot of the mountain for their clansmen to enjoy at any time. Sir Jiang Li. At this moment, a seemingly insignificant voice sounded from ahead. A black dot grew larger and larger in the air. It was the merman Namor, riding a flying demonic fish and quickly arriving in front of him. Namor's body visibly gained weight. It seemed that he had eaten quite well recently. He did not show as much respect as before, which would make the sea giant wary. However, while introducing this island, he gave Jiang Li a look. Jiang Li immediately knew what these giants were planning. They wanted to use a so-called banquet to reward this merman friend and their benefactor. With Jiang Li's appetite, he might not be able to eat a piece of meat from the sea giant. King, what are they doing? Jiang Li did not experience this giant banquet. The rough food was really hard for him to swallow. He flew to the giant king's side and pointed at the most lively place in the center of the banquet. Over 100 giants were gathered on a huge mountain with its head cut off. They roared with joy. Haha, my friend, that's our sea giants. Game. On the islands of those sinful pirates, we brought back some spoils of war, including many excellent ores. That will be enough to forge a new war hammer. According to our tradition, only the strongest warriors can have all the spoils of war. Friend, you can give it a try. Just press their wrists to the ground. Sure enough, Jiang Li saw a mountain of treasures and ores at the side. A portion of them were poured out from the Skull Palace. In terms of spirit stones, it would probably be able to make Jiang Li's wealth rise greatly. This time, the Dragon Transformation Island was really unlucky. The wealth that they had accumulated for many years through plunder was taken away by a group of sea giants in the end. As for the giants, they were surrounding the pitiful mountain and arm wrestling. The giant king, Quigon, did not hide the teasing expression on his face covered by the skull crown. Chapter 445, Arm Wrestling the Giant King 2. He was using this method to make Jiang Li back off. Due to the reputation of the merman race, they could make friends, but it was impossible to get any benefits from them. Jiang Li had long expected this attitude from them. These giants innately looked down on creatures smaller than themselves. If he did not reveal his muscles, they would really send Jiang Li away like they were sending away a beggar. Then I'll do as you say. It just so happened that the 2 giants who had been in a stalemate and roaring angrily finally decided the winner. The winner was a strong 2-headed giant. He raised his right hand high and accepted the cheers of his compatriots. The loser held his weak arm and silently retreated. Who else? The 2-headed sea giant raised its thick right hand and looked around, waiting for the next challenger. However, he had already won 9 rounds in a row, and no giant came forward again. At this moment, Jiang Li, who was riding Rayquaza, flew to the other side of the platform. Why don't you let me be your opponent? Jiang Li used his spiritual chi to amplify his voice as much as possible before letting these big guys notice him. The air was silent for a moment, and then the laughter of more than 100 giants directly broke through the clouds. The thick, steamy clouds above their heads were blown away. Blazing sunlight shone down, but it was blocked by the giants, casting a large shadow. Isn't this the human warrior who claimed to have fought with Xianxia for 3 days? Little one, my fingers are 10,000 times thicker than yours. Do you want to compete with my hair? 1. V. He stretched out a small finger that was like a huge pillar and swayed it in front of Jiang Li. The other giant warriors around him tried their best to suppress their laughter. A few giants with poor vision still lowered their heads and tried their best to find Jiang Li. Jiang Li was not angry at the other party's mockery. He stepped forward and grabbed the other party's pinky with his right hand. Then, the two-headed giant felt the world spin. For some reason, he had already fallen to the ground. His right wrist had already smashed into the stone platform made of a mountain. So who else? Jiang Li stood on the stone platform and raised his right hand like the giant just now. The surroundings were silent. The single eye of the group of sea giants almost popped out in shock. What happened was right in front of them, but they did not know what had happened. Cheating. You must have used despicable methods to cheat. I request to compete again. The two-headed sea giant that had fallen to the ground helped itself up from the stone platform and pointed at Jiang Li while roaring in exasperation. Logically speaking, the difference in size between the two sides was like the difference between a huge elephant and dust. Such a difference in victory and defeat appeared even stranger. Jiang Li did not refuse. He flew into the sky again and reached out to press on the other party's wrist. I wager the glory of the sea giants. I want you to fly 1,000 giant steps away. Both sides were prepared. The two-headed giant landed on the platform's elbows. His left hand, which was supporting the edge, and his feet, which were firmly rooted in the ground, spread out a canyon-like ravine below any support point. The power that the giant suddenly erupted with was enough to shake the world, but that power lost all effect and dignity in front of an ordinary human palm. No matter how hard the two-headed giant tried, it could not advance at all. Jiang Li had a foundation in body cultivation and was never weaker than others. Looking at the beast blood diagram, Wuxia, the emperor blood aperture refinement, and Kai Yu's muscles he had just obtained, which of them was not legendary? Compared to him in terms of pure strength, so what if he was a giant? He would definitely be asking for trouble. For the glory of the sea giants. The giant opposite him roared angrily. Thick blood vessels bulged on its mountainous body, and the blood flowing inside surged like the water of a river. However, Jiang Li blocked his wrist and still did not move. Not bad, not bad. You're really working hard. Hang in there, I'm going to use my strength. Right when his opponent erupted with his maximum strength, Jiang Li's calm voice sounded. Then, he pressed down on his opponent's wrist and firmly pushed back at a uniform speed. Puff, puff, puff. The blood vessels on his arm exploded, and the blood that shot out really flew out 1,000 giant steps. A large, sickly purple-black color quickly appeared under his skin. The muscles below were torn apart. The sound of the strong tendons breaking was like the sound of a steel cable on a bridge being torn apart. In the end, the thick wrist was still pressed down on the stone platform. The giant, who could not turn around no matter how hard he tried, relaxed his body and collapsed to the ground. Even with 2 heads, he still could not imagine how such power could crush him in such a small body. The surrounding giants gasped, almost emptying the place. The uncultured sea giants could not find the right words to describe their shock. Not far away, sitting on the still warm throne, the sea giant king Quigan also looked at Jiang Li solemnly. The two-headed giant was his 3rd younger brother. From the looks of it, he was the strongest person in the sea giant tribe, second only to him. Even he could not crush the two-headed giant so easily in terms of strength. Could it be that he really fought with that Xianxia for 3 days? If that was the case, the sea giant race had to change their attitude towards their benefactor. He touched the skull crown on his head, and felt the power passed down by the previous king, his father. King Quigun stood up from the throne and separated the crowd to stand opposite Jiang Li. My friend, let me be your opponent. Quigun also stretched out his right hand. In that hand, there was a continuous force like an ocean wave. He wanted to personally test how powerful this human was. The new sea giant king, Quigun, did not have such power a few days ago. Otherwise, he would have used brute force to unite the tribe. The source of this power was naturally the skull crown that he always wore on his head. The seemingly barbaric and cruel coronation tradition of the sea giant race was indeed unique. Jiang Li smiled as he looked at the hand that covered the sky. I can't ask for more. He reached out and plucked a fist-sized fresh tree seed from Rayquaza. Rayquaza was also a real plant. With the bloodline of the dragon race, it could easily break through reproductive barriers. After receiving the pollen of different plants, Rayquaza could produce high-quality seeds with different characteristics as Jiang Li's spell technique material. Holding this seed in his hand, spiritual light erupted. Surrounded by the dark green light, a dense vitality shot into the sky. 9 Nether Demon Awakening, Dragon Son Wuxia. Roar! A deep and resounding dragon roar sounded. A huge dragon standing up, one head taller than the giant king, appeared on the other side of the platform. This enormous dragon had a dragon head, dragon tail, and dragon claws. Only its body carried a huge tortoise shell. It was the tortoise shell that their sea giant race had just dug out a few days ago under Jiang Li's request. Roar! Golden light shot out from Wuxia's eyes. Pure dragon might spread wantonly, causing the entire sea giant tribe to tremble. After negotiating conditions with Wuxia and his body, Jiang Li would give it a chance to see the outside world, and Wuxia would take the initiative to lend him more strength. Come! The giant's wrist collided with Wuxia's claw. As both sides suddenly exerted strength, the stone platform under their hands could not withstand it and shattered. Then the entire island shook. The ground cracked, the wind and clouds changed, and the volcano in the center of the island erupted with magma. It was as if the entire island was about to shatter because of their battle. The power in the giant's hand was like an endless wave or a volcano eruption. It was indeed wonderful and powerful. However, under Wuxia's power, it was as if mountains were transported over and pressed down on Quigun's wrist. Pure strength crushed those fancy techniques. In the end, the giant king could not withstand it and lowered his arm in angry growls. Chapter 446, Giants Dance, Uninvited Guest 1. Powerful human warrior, these spoils of war are yours. Your strength has won the respect of the sea giant race. You are worthy of them. In addition, during the Dragon Transformation Island War earlier, Sir Jiang Li's help was extremely great. Please accept my race's highest gratitude. If you have any requests from the sea giant in the future, we will definitely not decline. King Quigun stood up from the ground with difficulty. Then, without caring about his reputation, he bent down and bowed to Jiang Li with the etiquette of the sea giant race. Earlier, Jiang Li had used his purest strength to crush his pride. Even if he obtained a portion of the power of the previous giant king through the coronation, he was still so powerless in front of this human. As Jiang Li's opponent, he knew very well what kind of power he had faced earlier. The current sea giant tribe was powerless to resist. With King Quigun taking the lead, the other sea giant warriors also bowed to the wood demon Wuxia in the middle and assumed the same posture. Jiang Li nodded in satisfaction. This group of giants was quite sensible. He originally thought that he would beat up all these hundreds of giants, but now it saved him a lot of trouble. Without removing Wuxia's wood demon body, Jiang Li stepped forward and helped the sea giant king up, slapping away the dozens of tons of dust on his body. King Quigun, you are too polite. The sea giants are the friends of the merman race. The friends of the merman race are my friends. Isn't it normal for friends to help each other? However, I do have a request. Please allow me. The sea giant king, Qui-Gon, smiled and thought to himself, as expected. What he was most afraid of was Jiang Li asking the sea giants to join his faction. That way, as a king, he would be inferior to others for no reason. As it turned out, not many of the variant humans who participated in the battle between humans ended up well. "Sir Jiang Li, please speak." Qui-Gon's loud heartbeat could not be concealed. Everyone knew that he was very nervous. "I heard that the sea giant race is the best craftsmen in the sea. In ancient times, you had once forged countless divine weapons for the dragon race. I wonder if you can open the furnace for me today." Jiang Li's tone sounded like a request, but he had already taken out a few blueprints and a flying sword that was covered in cracks from the tip of the sword. He wanted the sea giant race to forge the remaining 6 coffin nails for him and repair the damaged, immortal-slaying flying sword. The materials for the 6 coffin nails had been mostly gathered with the help of the Great Mountain Alliance and Yan Hong. Coupled with the various treasures plundered from the Dragon Transformation Island, it was more than enough to forge 6 high-grade profound rank coffin nails. After his immortal-slaying flying sword was defeated by the broken-wing Black Mosquito's spear, the main body's spirit essence was damaged from the crack, and there were no signs of improvement until now. With the abilities of those weapon refinement masters of the Great Mountain Alliance, they would probably be unable to repair it. Only then did Jiang Li find this group of giants. The material he provided was the metal fragment that he had brought out from the Xianxia tomb. At first, Jiang Li thought that this metal fragment was the token of Yellow Emperor Xianxia. Later on, after carefully comparing it with King Zhou's finger bone, he discovered that the true human emperor's token was actually Nuba's eyeball, the anti-cultivation spiritual bead. Under Jiang Li's appraisal technique, this metal fragment displayed the name fragment of the 9 Li weapon talisman. It was the weapon talisman token that Caillou used to rule the 9 Li tribe. Naturally, it was also the loot snatched from Caillou by Yellow Emperor Xianxia. To put it bluntly, the Xianxia tomb was the display room for the spoils of war of the Battle of Zhuelu. As for the use of this weapon talisman fragment, in ancient times, the 9 Li tribe had been destroyed for countless years. Even in the notes of appraisal, there was no reliable suggestion. The other information about the fragment was basically unknown. He only knew that its forging material also had the quintet chi essence copper. This weapon talisman fragment had no other use. He could try to use it as a material after smelting it. However, if he wanted to refine materials of this level, he needed a furnace with a very high temperature. "That's all, I mean no problem." Unexpectedly, Jiang Li only made a small request. It was really not worth mentioning to the sea giants. The sea giant king heaved a sigh of relief and agreed on the spot. After Jiang Li used the wood art and copied a few blueprints that were 10,000 times larger, Qui-Gon called his 8 brothers and held a meeting to study it. They looked stupid, but they actually had quite a lot of exquisite skills. Apart from the rune parts, even Jiang Li did not understand those blueprints. The 9 big guys only took a few glances and understood everything. "Jiang Li, my friend, it's only a few nails. There's no problem at all. Leave it to us." Jiang Li was looking around the island. He did not see anything that looked like a furnace. The furnace that could be used by the sea giant race should be very conspicuous. Then he heard Qui-Gon shout, "Little ones, it's time to dance for our respected friends." Dance? Jiang Li did not quite understand what he meant. Before refining weapons, they had to dance to liven things up. "Lord, a volcano is the best furnace for the sea giants." Chapter 447, Giants Dance, Uninvited Guests 2. The merman Namor ran over and explained to Jiang Li, but he was still confused. At this moment, the hundreds of sea giants who were gathered at the foot of the volcano to eat dispersed. They surrounded the huge volcano in circles and assumed a trampling posture. "The furnace is open." As the giant king shouted again, they raised their right feet and stepped on the ground rhythmically from the outside. Immediately, the ground on the island fluctuated like liquid. No animal on the entire island could stand firmly, and the flourishing forest was violently broken and pushed down. With their brute force, they caused a 9.9 level earthquake on the island. However, Jiang Li could see that the ripples under the feet of these giants were controlled by a special rhythm. They relied on the giants' dance to gather most of the power they trampled into the volcano in the center. The giants' trampling continued from the outside to the inside and finally gathered at the foot of the volcano. Then, a stream of earth-fire lava that emitted endless heat leaked out from the volcano above. In just a moment, the originally stable volcano was completely stimulated. The sea beasts that had been thrown in had already been burned to death. The volcanic lava that had been stimulated was flames from the core of the earth, enough to easily refine any high-grade metal. The giant king, Quigon, began to grab large amounts of ores and throw them into the volcano. As if he felt that it was not enough, he even picked some from the sea giant's own ores. Then, with his wild singing, his clansmen constantly changed the rhythm and strength of the giant's dance to control the temperature of the volcano furnace. Under such a high temperature, the refinement process that should have lasted for months in the palm of a human weapon refinement master had already been developed in just a few hours. It turned out that the sea giant's dance had such an effect. Its unique wild artifact refinement technique broadened Jiang Li's horizons. A day later, 6 coffin nails with completely different attributes formed in the same volcano. After the continuous pounding of the 9 giants, the 6 high-grade profound rank nails were completed. Jiang Li looked at the 6 long nails that were twice his height. He was quite satisfied. Although he did not know much about weapon refinement, the quality of these 6 nails was clearly much better than what the Great Mountain Alliance had produced. The sea giant race lived up to their reputation. Their technique was indeed not bad. Then the sea giant king took Jiang Li's immortal slaying flying sword and the fragment of the weapon talisman. He placed them in his palm and observed carefully with widened eyes. The refinement of the coffin nail just now could only be considered a furnace warming practice. Repairing this flying sword that was even smaller than their eyelashes was the true challenge. This flying sword was refined by Jiang Li using the spirit destruction metal, the dragon hunting arrow, the city god's ghost head saber, and his lifespan as materials. He also used his body as the furnace and his Tao essence as the hammer. Every curve of the sword was deeply engraved with the essence of the great Tao, and it was exquisite. As if there was a word to describe it, it was perfect. Facing such a craft, the sea giant race was deeply afraid that they would destroy that kind of Tao essence. They had never even seen the metal used as a repair material. A group of mountainous refinement masters gathered together and argued intensely for 3 days and 3 nights for the repair plan. Every trait had to be studied again. Every step had to be perfected. This was a huge challenge for them. After making all the preparations, they threw the flying sword and the fragments of the weapon talisman into the volcano. Just the initial refinement took them 9 days. In order to increase the temperature, the sea giant king even threw his throne into the volcano and sat down with his 2 brothers. Below, the giant dance continuously stirred up the lava, and above was sealed by the giant king's throne. More and more energy was accumulated in this volcano. The mountain swelled from the middle, and it seemed like it would explode at any moment. However, these big guys were very confident in their volcano. They danced even more crazily. Jiang Li's eyes could not see the immortal slaying flying sword through the mountain. However, as his intrinsic flying sword, he could sense an increasingly clear and immature will calling him from the inside of the volcano. It was as if they were related by blood, causing Jiang Li's heart to palpitate. This is a sword spirit. When he was refining the immortal slaying flying sword back then, Jiang Li had spent a lot of effort. Not only did he use the Shu Mountain secret technique, but he also used the life-stealing art that had the effect of self-harming to tear out a portion of his lifespan and throw it into it. This allowed the immortal slaying flying sword to have very high potential. After the flying sword appeared, it was extremely powerful and useful. However, although it could contain Jiang Li's strength to a certain extent and become stronger and stronger, it slowly could not keep up with his footsteps. Now that there was a sword spirit, it meant that the immortal slaying flying sword had at least reached the level of an earth-rank flying sword. As expected, the volcano that was swelling up and about to explode began to shrink at a visible speed. The magma that surged out at all times began to cool down and solidify. This was a flying sword that had broken through to the earth rank and needed to absorb a vast amount of spiritual chi and energy. The sea giants danced even harder, or else the volcano might be completely frozen by the flying sword. Then King Qui-Gon pushed aside his throne and anxiously used his hands to grab a large number of spirit stones. Chapter 448, Giants Dance, Uninvited Guests 3. The spirit stones exploded in the lava and turned into pure spiritual chi that was absorbed by the immortal slaying flying sword. The aura in the volcano did not hesitate at all. It directly broke through the earth rank and rose higher and higher. The foundation of the immortal slaying flying sword was extremely deep to begin with. Coupled with the huge background of the materials invested this time, an earth-rank artifact was only the beginning. Boom! A thick bolt of lightning descended, and King Qui-Gon, who was moving the spirit stones, bore the brunt of it. Blue-purple lightning flowed all over his body, burning a large area of shocking black. Under the might of the heavens, the sea giant king knelt on the ground and cried in pain. At some point, the surrounding steam and dark clouds surged, gathering a tribulation cloud with lightning surging on the top of the volcano. This was the tribulation lightning triggered when an artifact advanced to the earth rank. Jiang Li had experienced it when the Yin burial coffin advanced earlier. However, this time, there were too many powerful creatures under the tribulation clouds. This sea area was covered in thick, steamy dark clouds all year round, causing the power of the lightning tribulation to greatly increase. The commoners who were constantly dancing the giant dance looked into the sky in fear. Because of the existence of the tribulation lightning, their success rate in refining earth-rank artifacts had always been low. They did not know if they could succeed this time. Right when the tribulation cloud started to gather the second bolt of lightning, Jiang Li's figure flashed and appeared on the volcano. Moreover, he spread his aura and responded to the immortal slaying flying sword below. Such an arrogant action was equivalent to telling the tribulation clouds above that this was his artifact. Come at me. Immediately, the tribulation clouds in the sky noticed Jiang Li, and a pressure enveloped him. The faint sense of danger told him that he had already been locked onto by the tribulation lightning, and he would be the next to be struck. Lightning gathered in the sky, forming a bolt of lightning filled with a destructive aura in the center. The power contained in it was enough to take the sea giant king's life. However, in the next moment, the tribulation clouds in the sky suddenly shrunk, and the vast commotion stopped abruptly. After the originally overbearing tribulation clouds discovered Jiang Li, they began to quickly dissipate for some reason. The lightning tribulation that had long condensed was also unwilling to descend. The destructive force slowly dissipated in the air. After waiting for a long time, a symbolic bolt of lightning struck Jiang Li's body, causing 2 sparks to fly. There was no more reaction. Compared to the tribulation lightning that struck the giant King Qui-Gon earlier, the power was less than 20%. Then a few more chopsticks, lightning scattered down from the tribulation cloud. There was even half that directly struck Jiang Li crookedly before it could hit him. This difference in treatment stunned the group of weapon refinement masters from the sea giant race. This was the power of the high-grade merit blessing. Due to his good character, the heavens took care of him. He could even pick up spirit stones when he went out. Without the influence of the lightning tribulation, the immortal slaying flying sword's advancement was very smooth. The mountain-like spirit stones were invested at no cost. Jiang Li even used the spirit surging technique to directly feed the flying sword with top-grade spiritual qi from the inside. As a sword light shot into the sky, the brand new immortal slaying flying sword danced wantonly in the air like a playful child. The fierce sword light cut the air into pieces. From the bottom, the blue sky and white clouds seemed to have become a torn canvas. The sword scars that covered the sky could not heal for a long time. Jiang Li did not dare say that he could resist such might and speed. Moreover, the current immortal slaying flying sword was completely autonomous. It did not need Jiang Li to control it to display astonishing might. Haha, a treasure has appeared in the world. As the fated person, I'll take this treasure. Wait, no, I was wrong, save me. When an Earth-rank artifact appeared, there would always be strange phenomena accompanying it, which would often attract some people with ill intentions. A figure that had long been hiding in the sky darted out and reached out to grab the immortal slaying flying sword. However, the immortal slaying flying sword directly pierced through his palm and stabbed him again. The uninvited guest tried to flee but had nowhere to escape. Soon, he was forced to lower his height and was blocked by Jiang Li and hundreds of sea giant warriors. Chapter 449, Tragic Death 1. Fellow Taoist, looks like your fate has not come to an end. Jiang Li touched the immortal slaying flying sword that had flown back to his side and was spinning excitedly. The immortal slaying sword that had just given birth to a sword spirit had a tacit understanding with him. It knew that only by capturing this cultivator alive could he extract the greatest value. Otherwise, with the current strength of the immortal slaying flying sword, it could easily cut this guy into pieces. This is the island of the sea giants. I accidentally trespassed your precious land. Sorry. I'll leave immediately. The uninvited guest in front of him had also reached the soul formation realm. He looked short, fat, and had shifty-eyed. After being surrounded, he put on a smile and tried to bluff his way out. However, how could there be such a simple thing in this world? Since they dared to snatch his things, they had to be prepared to pay the price. On the side, the sea giant king, Quigon, was even angrier. He had just unified the sea giant tribe, and now there was actually a thief coming to snatch the treasure. If this guy left just like that, where would their sea giant race put their reputation? Quigon reached out, picked up a mountain beside him, and smashed it at the stout cultivator. There was still lava in this mountain. Under the enhancement of the sea giant king's power, its power had already reached the limit of the soul formation realm. However, in the next moment, a sharp sword light suddenly erupted, splitting the flying mountain from the middle. The familiar sword light caused Jiang Li's pupils to constrict slightly, and the sword finger he pointed out stopped. This is the demon-vanquishing sword art. Without Jiang Li attacking, the stout cultivator suddenly erupted and seized the opportunity to escape the giant warrior's encirclement. A sword rainbow appeared beneath his feet and carried him into the sky at high speed. A group of fools who can't fly, Grandpa is leaving. As he fled on his sword, he did not forget to point his finger back and rain down sword lights from the sky. Although they could not heavily injure the sea giant warriors on the ground, those light swords were extremely sharp and could easily break through the giant's skin. As long as he could block them for a moment, it was enough to let him escape. As for Jiang Li, he was sandwiched between so many giants that the stout cultivator did not notice at all. However, Jiang Li's eyes were staring fixedly at that guy. This unfamiliar cultivator's sword technique puzzled him greatly. Shu Mountain Myriad Sword Technique. His figure flashed, and Jiang Li had already appeared on the path that the fleeing sword light had to pass through. Kid who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, you still want to block my path? Look at my heavenly sword. Form my body into a sword and become one with the sword. When he saw Jiang Li, who suddenly blocked in front of him, the stout sword cultivator riding the sword light directly fused with the flying sword beneath him. Immediately, the sword light rose to a length of 100 feet, and its might increased along with it. It stabbed towards Jiang Li at a speed that was impossible to capture with the naked eye. This was the ultimate move of the Shu Mountain sword technique. When one became one with the sword, they could unleash their strongest power, enough to pierce through any obstruction in front of them. Then a fist met him. The ordinary fist collided with the sword light that was one with the sword. The sorrowful cry of a flying sword sounded, and the 100 feet sword light shattered with a bang. The man and sword became one and were beaten back to their original forms. The stout figure rolled his eyes and fell to the ground with a flying sword. The sky fell and created a human-shaped hole in the ground. The giants who had been angered by the myriad sword technique just now stepped forward to show this guy the power of a foot. If not for Jiang Li stopping him, he would probably not even be able to find any flesh. He raised his hand to grab the flying sword that the other party had landed on the ground, and Jiang Li recognized the unique flying sword craft with a single glance. It was indeed the most orthodox Shu Mountain flying sword. So what was going on with this guy? As far as Jiang Li knew, there was no other Shu Mountain inheritance in the current cultivation world of the eastern region. The Shu Mountain 5 Elements peak of the Great Mountain region was the only orthodox Shu Mountain lineage. If others had happened to learn a move or two of the Shu Mountain sword technique, he would believe it. However, the demon vanquishing sword art, the Shu Mountain myriad sword technique, the Shu Mountain heavenly sword, and this flying sword that was refined using the Shu Mountain secret technique. In fact, he could sense that the other party had even awakened his sword heart for the second time, and had already refined the sword bone. Jiang Li would not believe that he could learn everything by chance. Who are you? Where did you secretly learn the Shu Mountain sword technique? Jiang Li shouted, but the person on the ground did not move. It's impossible to escape through the ground here. If you continue to pretend to be dead, I'll extract your sword bone. He waved his hand and shot out a light sword that stabbed into the short and fat sword cultivator's thigh. The shifty-eyed guy stood up. Cough, cough, little friend, please spare me. Little friend, please spare me. I am the Shu Mountain sword cultivator, Zhang Bobo. Everything that happened today was a misunderstanding. If you are interested in the Shu Mountain sword technique, I can take in a disciple on behalf of my master and teach you the Shu Mountain sword technique. That's the legacy of the ancient immortal sect, the Shu Mountain sword sect. I usually charge hundreds of thousands of spirit stones. However, young friend, can you return my flying sword first? Zhang Bobo clearly thought that Jiang Li had taken a fancy to his Shu Mountain sword technique, and agreed to hand over the sword technique without any hesitation in exchange for Jiang Li's forgiveness. However, Jiang Li was indifferent. He grabbed the other party's flying sword in his hand and did not give the flying sword any chance no matter how it struggled. You're a Shu Mountain sword cultivator. Why have I not seen you before? Chapter 450, Tragic Death 2. Shameless villain, you must have attacked my Shu Mountain disciple and snatched his flying sword inheritance. You still want to argue after landing in my hands today. With a thought, the immortal slaying flying sword split into two, two into four, and four into eight. Soon, it transformed into thousands of flying swords that were fake and real. They circled around the sword tip and pointed at the other party. He could pierce the fat cultivator's heart with 1,000 swords at any time. The myriad sword technique executed by Jiang Li was obviously much more brilliant than the sword of light that the pudgy cultivator had created earlier. The immortal slaying flying sword's main body enlarged by 100 times. The sword body coiled with the aura of 2 emperor dragons and hung above Zhang Bobo's head. He possessed the human emperor's qi and the bloodline of the dragon race. The power of the foxy yellow dragon sword and the Shu Mountain sword technique was peerless in his hands. Obviously, Jiang Li did not believe this fellow's words. There were only a few soul formation sword cultivators from the Shu Mountain 5 Elements peak. Jiang Li had seen all of them before, but there was no such person. The short and stout cultivator, who was pointed at by the myriad sword technique and the foxy yellow dragon sword, broke out in a cold sweat. You also know the Shu Mountain sword technique. Could it be that you're a disciple of the Five Elements Peak? Wait, misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. My master is the cliffless sword Pei Zhang. Senior brother, wait, we're from the same sect. In order to live, the stout cultivator even called him senior brother. He was at least dozens of years older than Jiang Li. However, his words still spared his life. Only the phantom sword that was split out stabbed into the 18 major acupuncture points in his body, sealing off the possibility of this guy using other methods. The foxy yellow dragon soared above, pressed against the space between his brows, but it did not fall in the end. Fellow Taoist, why make things up? The cliffless sword Pei Zhang died 1,000 years ago. Where did your master come from? When Jiang Li heard this name, he only felt that it was a little familiar at first. He also thought for a long time before recalling that he had once seen such a name on the tablet of the Shu Mountain Spirit Hall. He felt that the other party's words were ridiculous, but Zhang Bobo being able to say this name also surprised him. After all, he was a person from 1,000 years ago. Even if it was a true Shu Mountain disciple, they might not be able to call him that. Dead? That's not right. I saw my master a month ago. He's still alive and well. There's also Uncle Master Luo Xing and Uncle Master Likanghai. They opened a Shu Mountain Sword Hall with my master. Senior brother, have you never seen them before? He said the names of 2 more dead people, causing Jiang Li's expression to change slightly. This stout cultivator did not seem to be lying to him. Moreover, it was unlikely to make a poor lie about people who had already died. However, the flying swords of those 3 were still worshipped in the Shu Mountain Sword Tomb. If they were really alive, how could there be no news sent back for 1,000 years? Where are the 3 seniors now? Master won't let me. Tragic Death City. They're all in Tragic Death City. The tip of the immortal slaying flying sword was clearly more convincing than his master's instructions. However, the land of blood, Tragic Death City. This was the second time Jiang Li had heard this name. The last time he had heard of it was at the floating auction in Phoenix Sun City. At that time, a strange Earth-rank artifact from the Tragic Death City had appeared at the auction and was finally taken down by the people of the Myriad Slaughter sect. In the end, the Blood King crown was worn on the head of the Myriad Slaughter sect master, Wu Fan. Due to the grudges with the Myriad Slaughter sect, Jiang Li had specially asked about that place. However, the mysteriousness of that place was not inferior to the 3 divine pillars of the Divine Judgment Hall. There were very few rumors in the market. There were also those common stories of poor young people. For example, those who had accomplished nothing suddenly entered the Tragic Death City one day and obtained the guidance of an expert inside. After they came out, they jumped over the wall and created a legend of establishing a sect. In the past, this kind of story could only be heard. However, looking at Zhang Bobo in front of him, Jiang Li suddenly felt that the situation in Tragic Death City was probably deeper than he had imagined. This short and fat sword cultivator might be the best guide. Fellow Taoist Zhang Bobo, since you say that you're a Shu Mountain disciple, then I'll temporarily take you back to the 5 Elements Peak to acknowledge your ancestors. On the other side, on the map of the eastern region of the Azure Cloud continent, it was marked as an extremely dangerous area, a place of blood. A faint blood-colored fog filled the air. In the whistling wind, it was as if there were ghosts wailing in unwillingness. Today, more than 100 flying ships had intruded into this dangerous place. The flying ships flew extremely slowly. They squeezed through the fog bit by bit and slid warily here at a height that was almost touching the ground. If one approached, they would discover that these flying ships were connected by thick iron chains. The edges of the ships were almost touching each other. Lord Sect Master, the lock on the ship behind us is broken. We lost 3 more flying ships. On the flagship in the center of the flying ship group, a blood saber elder was kneeling on the deck and handing a thick chain to Wu Fan. He reported the losses of the fleet with a defeated expression. This was not the first time such a thing had happened since they entered this bloody place. On the 3 flying ships that had just been lost, there was a blood saber elder who was not inferior to him. This made him feel deeply helpless, since when did soul formation cultivators disappear so silently? Up until now, they did not even know how those ships had disappeared. The danger of this bloody place was beyond their expectations. After the huge flying ship fleet entered this area, they began to mysteriously disappear. Later on, they even used iron chains to connect the flying ships together. However, even so, the thick rune chains would still inexplicably break. As they advanced, only half of the remaining fleet was left. The losses were unprecedented. Wu Fan looked at the cut section. It was as if some creature had forcefully broken the chain with its teeth. He only nodded indifferently. If they could come and go as he pleased, could it still be called the land of blood? Those dead disciples were actually sacrifices for them to pass through. Each one that died would allow one to pass. This was the rule of entering the land of blood. Pass down the order, throw in the tragic death souls. The saber-wielding slave beside the myriad slaughter sect master, Wu Fan, had already been replaced by a fair-skinned female cultivator. With his order, the saber-wielding female cultivator took out a black bolt of lightning and shot it at the fog. After receiving the order, the remaining flying ships began to throw out jars with talismans. The jars shattered on the ground, and countless transparent figures immediately surged out. Although the quality was far inferior to the ghost soldiers in Jiang Li's coffin, the number was far greater. The myriad slaughter sect easily massacred cities and destroyed countries. They had never lacked ghosts. After the souls of these people who had died tragically were released, they were first confused for a moment before walking towards the same place as if they were attracted by something. Behind the heads of these tragic death souls, there was a faint black thread that stretched back to the flying ships of the myriad slaughter sect. The power of one soul was insignificant. 10, 100, 1,000 were similarly not worth mentioning. However, if it was 1,000,000, 10 million, or even more, it was enough to gather a force that could make people look sideways. Using these souls as the servants, they pulled the remaining flying ship of the myriad slaughter sect and slowly walked towards a certain place in the fog. Only with the guidance of those who died tragically can we find the legendary tragic death city. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, after 7 days, most of the tragic death souls had already dissipated. A large number of jars were thrown out of the myriad slaughter sect's fleet, and the tragic death souls continued to pull the flying ship. 7 days passed like this. Finally, after 7 times, a huge city slowly appeared in front of the blood-colored fog. The ghosts holding the flying ship walked into the city in a daze. However, to a living person, the city was like a mirage that could not be touched. At this moment, Wu Fan gave another order. Blood-colored daggers were distributed to all the remaining disciples of the myriad slaughter sect. The method to enter the city in front of them was very simple. They just had to slit their throat and stab their heart.